Hi, you're watching Bloomberg Quint. This morning we've seen a fairly tragic story play out of a wounded CEO of a company that is, nothing smaller than one of India's leading IT companies, that's Infosys, a regretful board and a plunging stock price, Neeraj. And, that is the story of Vishal Sikka and Infosys this morning. Very, very, very emotional comments coming in from Vishal Sikka in his letter to both his employees at Infosys and to the board. A very angry sounding board in their letter, that was released to stock exchanges and otherwise, and a very unhappy stock price.
Yeah, 6.5%, 7% down, and we'll talk about the stock as well, Meenka. But first, a question to you. Some time ago, I think less than a year ago, Vishal Sikka gave out this statement that I'm a Kshatriya warrior, I'm here to stay. Less than a year later, due to leaked emails from the founders, founding members, so on and so forth, or whatever it is that, that was the last straw on the camel's back, ahead of the board meeting, or because the letter states that the date was yesterday, the CEO has resigned 3 years into his tenure.
Yes, I know, and it's a shocking turn of events, and I'm using the word shocking, which is a fairly big word, and we are very conservative in our commentary, Neeraj. But it's shocking because this is playing out at a company that at one time was the hallmark, the highest pinnacle of governance in this country. When people spoke of corporate governance, they spoke of Infosys. And instead, what we've seen in the last 6 months is exactly what you said. All kinds of allegations against the management of the company, the board of the company, a reshuffle in the board of the company as a consequence of that. This constant standoff between the founders and the former management of the company, and those founders continue to be shareholders even today. So I can say founders, promoters and shareholders of the company and the current management. And the curious part of all of this is that the man who's been leading the charge on the founder or the promoter side has been Mr. Murthy, and he is the person who appointed Vishal Sikka as the managing director and CEO of Infosys. And clearly his view of Vishal Sikka seems to have changed or turned a dramatic 180 degrees in the last 6 months. Yes.
So while we get the stock perspective, Meenka, I just want to ask you, this morning we were having this conversation as well, and I think you were of the opinion that the die should be cast either way. Either this should be sorted and Vishal Sikka should be out, or the other way, that he should be given full freedom and this constant badgering between the two sides should over. So is that a silver lining that finally we know what is happening, that Vishal Sikka is no longer going to be at the helm of affairs? We don't know who will steer the ship. So that's a big question, yes. And I'm sure investors would be edgy. But there is one small clarity as the small...
So I'm going to, I preempted your question. I knew you were going to bring this up, and I was thinking about it, since the morning news broke. Think of it this way. Here's a company that decided to give every founder the chance to run the company, even though they may or may not have been capable of it. So the first few founders, that is Mr. Murthy and Nandan Nilekani, were more than capable. They took that company to great heights. But the tail end of founders didn't quite do that. They weren't able to steer the company in the right direction. As a result of which, we saw the return of Murthy to Infosys, and then the induction of Vishal Sikka, who had never worked in the Indian environment before, who worked at SAP earlier on, but who seemed to have enough of a global view to find the confidence of Mr. Murthy and the board, and therefore he was brought in to lead this company. Okay, so you then had a situation build up over the last 6-8 months where you had a management appointed by the founders, especially Mr. Murthy, face off against Mr. Murthy. What do you have today? Vishal Sikka has not left the company.
Yes.
He will now be executive vice chairman. It's an executive position, not a non-executive position. So the founders will continue with their point of view on what the company should be doing and what the governance standard should be. Vishal Sikka, with all this anguish, will continue in the position of executive vice chairman. And you will have a third person who will now be brought in to run the company ostensibly. So if you had earlier 2 fronts over the last 6 months, you now have 3 fronts that could potentially not see eye to eye and make it very, very difficult for the regular operation of this company. And that's how I see it. And I'm not trying to be very pessimistic or negative about it, but it does seem that egos are what hurt Infosys, and those egos are not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, and mind you, this is a company that is operating in a scenario wherein the sector is also having issues by itself and competition from global companies. Indian IT had this edge of cost maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years ago. It no longer has that edge. So there is a strong competition coming from global peers as well. in a scenario like this, you want a steady state at the company.
Just last quarter, when the earnings came out, we were discussing Infosys versus TCS. And Infosys, many of the parameters, operating parameters such as margins, were better than TCS. Though I must add here, TCS is a much, much larger company. But that quarter seemed to have gone well for Infosys. Today, TCS looks like this island of peace in comparison, right?
Yeah.
So if you were taking a bet on IT as an investor, TCS just looks like this fabulously run company that's managed the transition from Chandra to Rajesh reasonably well. And Rajesh, who's been around in the company for a long time, will have a reasonably free run under the guidance of Chandra to take the company ahead, whereas Infosys will be this clubbing of three different points of view, unfortunately. Let's get an external expert view on this. We have with us Deepak Shenoy, a well-known market voice. Deepak, thank you very much for joining us on this tumultuous morning. I would have liked to ask you what you'd make of all of this, but instead I'm going to start by asking you, do you think that there's a chance of peace at Infosys, given that the founders will continue to have a point of view on how the company should be run and their governance standards, that Vishal Sikka continues in an executive position, and now somebody new will be brought in the managing director and CEO position?
Morning, Menika. I think, from what I'm hearing, I think Vishal Sikka will only be executive chairman until there is clarity on the new management that steps in. I also think that, that the likelihood of any of the other founders getting into this other than Mr. Murthy is very, very low. I think it's only Mr. Murthy for the time being that seems to be, publicly voicing disagreements and so on. I think tomorrow's board meeting may throw a larger picture. It's not going to just be the buyback. It's probably going to be the appointment of another CEO or appointment of the larger management team and structure in place. This is probably also something that, is not just come around just yesterday. It's probably been in the works for a while. It seems to me that because of the length of the letters that we're seeing and the kind of commentary, that it's probably something that is going to be revealed to us in a very short time from now. So there is potentially more to come on terms of clarity, but I don't expect Mr. Sikka to stick around with Infosys much longer when the new management is in place.
Hey, Deepak, in the morning, Mohandas Pai was in conversation with us here on Bloomberg Quint, and he suggested that maybe one of the reasons that Vishal Sikka was still being retained in the company in an executive vice chairman position was because probably the company had signed an expensive parachute with him, or an expensive, compensation package in the event of his untimely departure. And that was probably why they felt the need to keep him on as executive vice chairman. I don't want to be unfair to Vishal Sikka. I don't want to suggest that the only reason is to fulfill a commitment and not because of his capability. But do you think that might be the likely reason?
If you sign a contract and, the amount is trivial by Infosys standards, I think, the right way would be to just let him go, because, you can't have a person, removed from chairman, made an executive vice chairman, and expect the new management to be able to perform easily. I think, that will just leave a lot of bad blood. If it's for the sake of a little compensation, I think that'll just be the wrong thing for Infosys to do. But if that's, I don't know what the reason is. It's probably speculative, but I believe that he will leave when the management is in place, exit package or not.
Okay, all right. We don't know either, and I must warn all our viewers here that probably the details will only be revealed in the conference call that Infosys is doing at 11 o'clock, and then the press conference that it's doing this afternoon. Very quickly, I want to bring up a couple of comments from the board in the letter that they filed with the exchange today, bidding adieu to Vishal Sikka. A fairly angry sounding board, because it said that, it denounces the critics who have amplified and sought to further promote demonstrably false allegations which have harmed employee morale. That was one of the comments coming in. The board also said it is profoundly distressed by the unfounded personal attacks on the members of our management team that were made in the anonymous letters and have surfaced in recent months. So the board referencing all the leaked emails that you were talking about, Neeraj.
Yeah, and clearly, that was something that came as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people as well, the letters that were cited in the newspaper yesterday. The question though remains, Deepak, is what is it that would work better for investors going ahead? Now, assuming that you were a large shareholder, Deepak, what would you cite for in terms of clarity? Would you want clarity on how would how would the process of Vishal Sikka's exit be? Or would you want clarity on what's the time frame by which the founder, promoters, or whoever else is in the scheme of things is going to bring in a new person at the helm? Because for now, it's a ship without a captain, so to say, or an interim captain at best.
So, no, there is an interim captain. I think Ravi.
Yeah, as I said, an interim captain.
Yes, but I think see, if I were a large shareholder, I would look to two things. First of all, when Satyam had this disaster, the first thing that the other big IT companies did was go and munch up their customers. They would go into the other customers and say, look, Satyam does not have any leadership. We want to give your business to us. This is exactly what Infosys needs to avoid to lose business. So forget what's happening elsewhere. We need a plan to stem that flow and show decisive action. That action needs to be getting a new management team in place, getting complete clarity on Mr. Murthy comments. I think the board has been clearly saying that they're distressed, but I think at this point they should not make any steps to say that they will reinstall Mr. Murthy on board or anything like that, because that would be promoting this kind of behavior further. So they need to be quite equivocal about the positioning that they are. They're going to be fully backing new management, and they need to stop. They need to have a plan of action for the future in conjunction with large management. I think with the management, I think these steps will possibly create a feeling of stability or some immediate term stability that will come on the VNC business model and for the stock per se. Overall, I don't think this is I think this is something that the board has to step up and address. They've not really shown a lot of gumption in stepping up and actually taking a lot of action. I think this is time for them to do it and demonstrate where they stand.
All right, Deepak, stay with us because those are good guiding points on what to expect from the company in both the conference call in a few minutes from now and the press conference in the afternoon. Meanwhile, while Deepak stays online, we have for you comments from Vishal Sikka in his resignation letter, if I may call it that. Neeraj will bring you comments from how investors are reacting, so a quick take on that. And Harsha's been speaking with some board members of Infosys, off the record, of course, and he has some perspective on that as well. Let's start with what is a very wounded sounding Vishal Sikka in the comments. We can pull up the very first quote that we wanted to bring to your attention, where he speaks about the distractions of the many last few months, the constant drumbeat of the same issues over and over again, while ignoring and undermining the good work that has been done, taking the excitement and passion out of this amazing journey. That's quote number one that we wanted to bring to you. Quote number two coming up on your screen as well, hopefully, very quickly, which tells you that Vishal Sikka is saying clear to me that despite our successes over the last 3 years and the powerful seeds of innovation that we have sown, I cannot carry out my job as CEO and continue to create value while also constantly defending against unrelenting distractions, is I assume what he was trying to say. Sorry, in the middle of breaking news, sometimes graphics also go wrong. But the one thing I wanted to point out about Vishal Sikka's letter, he's disappointed, drumbeat of distractions, malicious, false, baseless allegations. Those are all words he's used in the letter. But he cited two things in the opening of the letter that suggests how wounded he was. He spoke of a death of an employee, right, at Infosys. And then he spoke of the Charlottesville events that took place, right? Yeah. And I'm trying to bring up that line for you. And here's what he said. He spoke of an employee who died of a heart attack. He spoke of the Charlottesville incident. And then he said, this has demonstrated once again the power of words and silences to cause real damage or to heal. And that's a man very upset with the fact that he was given charge to run a company but not necessarily given the freedom to execute on that basis. I
think that's been the sum and substance of Vishal Sikka's tenure right from the day he took on. I'm just going to take a step back, and I was trying to recall the day when he assumed office, sometime during June or July 2013. On that day, a group of shareholders led by Mohandas Pai, the former CFO Bala, and a bunch of them asked for a buyback. There was absolutely no grace on the day that a new CEO takes over the company, a bunch of shareholders. So my point is, Vishal Sikka's problem started then, of just being distracted from the line of business. Yes, he set a target of $20 billion by 2020. He is nowhere near achieving that. But to be fair, I think a number of transformational initiatives that he's done it's been a mixed bag. Some have worked, some has not worked. But the two key questions, and the recent letter that Narayan Murthy wrote concerning Panaya's acquisition, right? 2 points that even Andy Mukherjee was writing in his column yesterday is that why is it that the board didn't make any of those disclosures public? Why was the evidence still kept back? They got an external law firm to come and do a probe, and it was almost as if they were the jury, judge, and it's almost.
But in an exchange filing, Harsha, the board said that we found, there was nothing to find, that there was no wrongdoing found.
Agreed, but why did they still hold back the reports and the evidence?
Which was the demand of the founders, led by Mr. Murthy.
The second question is, what has prompted Vishal Sikka's exit other than this barrage of questioning? They could have well said, here is the evidence, go take it. And Vishal could have still continued doing what he was doing.
So you're saying the circumstances were suspicious?
Were suspicious.
And they warranted this kind of action maybe?
No, the point, the third and more important question is, what confidence does this board have? If the board is unable to run a company, let the CEO do his job, the board has instituted a probe, and yet a bunch of shareholders are not happy with it. What confidence does this board have to continue? Deepak was making a comparison with Satyam. There is no wrongdoing here. Nobody's saying that, alluding to any wrongdoing at all. But
No, I'm sorry. There is no wrongdoing to the extent that went on in Satyam, but the questions that have been raised about the Panaya acquisition, why the general counsel left, why the CFO quit, all of them seem to point, very suspiciously towards some kind of wrongdoing, right? You spoke to some board members. What did they have to say?
Well, one former board director on conditions of anonymity said it's more than a Machiavellian plot, saying this is Mr. Murthy and a bunch of his cohorts acting to oust Sikka and the rest. He said, but this is just one story that you're hearing. This is the narrative that they want you to hear. There are many stories within the story. There are many wheels within the wheels. So there are pressures at play. He was obviously not willing to disclose more than that. The point is this was coming for a long time. And it looks like Panaya was just the tip of the iceberg. The key question I still have is, when Ravi Venkatesan was made the co-chair of the board, one quite didn't understand what prompted that move too.
That's because Murthy or let me put it this way, the co-founders led by Mr. Murthy had expressed a loss of confidence in the board's leadership and thought that maybe Mr. Seshasai wasn't doing as much of a job that he ought to as the chairman of the board.
Which is not
and
the
so
same to the bunch of shareholders.
They reinforced that position by bringing Ravi Venkatesan in to be joint chairman, right? So.
Agreed, but none of this adds up. None of this adds up to the exalted standards of corporate governance that this company has set for itself for the last 30 years.
Exactly what I said.
Yeah. And
how are investors
by the way, and
this?
we've had an IT company founder and MD, Persistent Systems, tweeting this out as well, that he's highly disappointed that the erstwhile high standards set by companies and groups are now at these levels. Now, it's unusual for an IT company CEO or a founder to come out and speak about this. But to answer your question, Menka, there's a set of shareholders who are saying that let's wait and watch what happens. A large domestic insurance company that we spoke to on condition of anonymity said that losing Vishal Sikka, I'll quote him, losing Vishal Sikka is strategically a big loss, but from a stock perspective, it's a neutral event because it's not that Vishal Sikka really took Infosys stock to great heights, and they are more bullish on the mid caps. But I just want to bring in one small point here. I think looking at Infosys in isolation that Vishal Sikka took over 3 years ago, what has he done in 3 years? Look at what's happened to revenues, etc. is a bit of a misnomer because, quite frankly, if you look at 20 IT companies, maybe 2 or 3 have outperformed. The rest haven't. So it's not as if Vishal Sikka has a magic wand and he would have transformed the company in 3 years' time. You probably need to give a long tenure in a time like this when IT is going through a state of turmoil, so to say. So I think looking at it in isolation is probably a wrong way to do it.
But as has been pointed out earlier this morning, Mohandas Pai was speaking to us, and this is a question, Deepak, I want to toss to you as well. It doesn't seem to be the performance of Vishal Sikka on purely financial terms that has led to this standoff or led to this very crisis event that has taken place this morning, right? Even Mohandas Pai was pointing out that it was more the lack of governance or the lack of transparency when it came to the Panaya acquisition, or when it came to chartering flights, or when it came to the CFO's resignation, or the big large package that the general counsel left with that disturbed the co-founders or the promoters, who are also shareholders, and therefore they were agitating about it.
But can you really differentiate between the two? Because you come on as a CEO of a company, you decide or you convince the board saying that I need to acquire this company. They go ahead and make the acquisitions. Questions are raised about that acquisition. So can you differentiate the fact that you've taken a step to acquire a company and say that a corporate governance issue that the board will deal with, and this is not really...
So you're saying if Vishal Sikka did anything incorrect...
Under his leadership...
Then the board was complicit in that incorrect.
Exactly. So how can the board not...
Do you have news on the...
No, I don't have news, but I have news that we'll have the call in a couple of minutes. So let's get in a comment from Deepak.
Deepak? Yeah. Hey, Deepak, let's make this forward-looking, right? Do you think today Infosys, in the position that it is, can find a good leader to come in and take charge? Now, whether that is an external leader or someone from within, given the fact that these three different points of view, the board's point of view, Mr. Murthy and other promoters' point of view, and Vishal Sikka, who continues for a brief while, his point of view will persist?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The question is whether they will be. I think the point now, I think Menika is going forward. The problem is this interference of an external shareholder, not even a board member, that is causing all conflict. If any external person had to come in and take over as a CEO, they would need some kind of assurance that this kind of stuff will not happen again. Vishal Sikka did have Mr. Murthy's blessing when he came in. Promoting an internal person is probably the right thing to do. They probably have people in mind who will take this forward, and I hope that will help resolve some of these issues. I don't see any issues of wrongdoing per se. There may be a different philosophy of compensation that has been brought in by Mr. Sikka, which is fine. It happens in larger companies. I don't see this as a big issue. The numbers are not so big that it astounds people in companies like this. But Infosys culture was different. That they need to dissociate themselves. At least the founder that is complaining, Mr. Murthy, needs to understand that somebody else runs this company and it has to be run. They have to be given a little bit of freedom to be able to run it. We can protest, but you have to do it in private. If you keep making a public spectacle, this is going to ruin the standing of the company and the planning of the CEO or the management team itself. Now, if this comes through, I think Infosys remains a strong player in the IT space. And as the IT space recovers, they will take benefit out of it. If it doesn't, then there's going to be a downhill battle for this company to move forward.
You know, Deepak, call me pessimistic, but I'm a little apprehensive about anybody wanting to take charge of this company. Yeah. And even if they do find a leader in this environment, somebody being able to succeed against the odds. The business odds are one thing, but the fact is that I think the promoters have made very clear over the last 6-8 months that they have a strong voice, and as shareholders they're going to assert that voice in whatever manner it takes. So whether it's leaked letters, leaked emails, all of that may continue if they find the next person to also not toe the line, and that line is being drawn by them because Vishal Sikka was appointed by them. Let's not pretend that Vishal Sikka came in from anywhere else and the founders and the promoters were not happy with that selection. So I find it really difficult to believe that this crisis is going to be as simple as a remuneration and nomination committee or a search committee finding the next capable guy and putting him in place, and then the crisis will have passed. I think we're going to take another year or two to recover from what has happened at Infosys, from a governance point of view at least, and then figure out whether whoever is appointed in Vishal Sikka's place has the ability to face all of this. But we have the Infosys conference call that has just begun, so let's cut to that. What happened?
Okay, we'll just cut to the con call as it starts. The key question, one more question that I had to both of you. Is this about performance, corporate governance, or for a new CEO, also the point of towing the line, I'm using those terms, towing the line of what the founder shareholders have in mind? Because it certainly seems over the last 3 years that everything that the CEO wanted to do, in a manner of speaking, was either questioned or being held accountable by those. Whatever the board wanted to do was questioned by these founding shareholders. So everything that happens within Infosys, even though there may be an independent board and an independent CEO, is still going back.
But what kind of exact constitutional structure is this, where a former founder, a bunch of founders or promoters believe that their word has to be followed. This is a bizarre situation.
Mohandas Pai said this morning to us in the conversation we were doing with him, which was also live and is available on BloombergQuint.com and all our social media, that Menka, you're being harsh on the founders. Don't forget, this is the first company in India where the founders walked away. The founders make a big deal of that, look, we walked away. But why is that such a big deal? You always claim to want to run a professionally led company.
Correct.
So why are you making a big deal of the fact that you walked away?
And you haven't quite walked away, have you? I mean, you walked away in principle, but you still sort of, you are well within your right to exercise your, as a shareholder.
Correct.
But beyond that, why are you, what is not, it is very evident that the CEO, the second CEO says that business has been interfered. But, I want to, talk about another point, and Deepak was mentioning culture. And you were talking about finding the next CEO. Think about today an employee of Infosys. How is he feeling? 3 years, there's been so much of transition. 2 CEOs, former promoter comes back as CEO. That has changed. Then an external CEO is brought in. He says this is the new world as I'm showing it to you. And suddenly he steps down. So
Harsha, exactly the same point we raised in the morning, because the Mint story, if you saw today, had a quote from Narayan Murthy, or not a quote from Narayan Murthy, I'm saying that incorrectly, claimed to have in possession an email apparently written by Mr. Murthy to some of his advisors, where Mr. Murthy is saying that 3 directors on the board of Infosys have told me that Vishal Sikka is not CEO material, he's CTO material. So he's better suited for a chief technology officer position. My question is, if you were an executive at Infosys taking orders from Vishal Sikka or someone below him, what have you done to dent the confidence of that man? Because suddenly you've told him your leader is actually not really leader material. He's got great thoughts on technology, etc., but he doesn't have anything else going for him. This is the most damaging way a group of shareholders can bring about change in a company. They have all the right in the world to say we don't like what's happened, there isn't enough transparency, we demand more transparency. If you don't get it from the management of the board, you take recourse in legal options.
Correct.
You find a way to make those disclosures happen. But you don't leak emails and letters in this fashion or allow for these leaks to happen to make your displeasure known.
I'll point out to just one more sort of disconnect. I remember every quarter when Murthy was CEO, the one line that he sort of championed was to say that there should be no asymmetry of information between the internal world and the external world. And today that asymmetry is being created by him and by his camp by leaking information to the public. And this has happened consistently, bringing down the same institution and bringing down the same culture that you have stood for, which I find is hugely hypocritical right now.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I'm sure that your words will not sit very well with the founders if they're watching this, which I'm sure. But the truth is that if there is fault on the side of Vishal Sikka for maybe doing acquisitions he ought not to have, or maybe being opaque in many ways, and if there is fault on the side of the board for not being the right check and balance when it comes to management, there's equal fault on the side of the co-promoters in doing all of this in this ugly public fashion.
Yeah, was there a way to give an honorable exit, even if you wanted a CEO out, so to say?
Well, I'm not in favor of honorable exits.
No,
make your point of view.
Why wash
Make
dirty
your
linen
point
in
of
public?
view. Write a letter to the board. Ask for action. Insist for that action. If that action is still not forthcoming, then use other more constructive means of making that action happen.
So constructive is the right word, because by this, the morale of the employee, or the thing that we're saying, does definitely get dented in a big way. So was there a better way to do it, is the question.
Yeah, well, we're still waiting, by the way, for that conference call to start. The dialing has happened, but the commentary has not yet started. So as soon as that does happen, we'll take you right across to the Infosys conference call, and that's something you don't want to miss. So hang in there with us as we talk a little bit more about the events this morning.
And request Deepak to stay on as well. I'm told he's back. Deepak, just stay on a bit, but you wanted to make a point.
No, let's go across to Deepak, in fact, because I think what we've had to say is now fairly apparent in all our conversations since morning. Deepak, if you were to enumerate the 3 or 4 things in point form that you are hoping to hear from the company in this conference call and in the media conference this afternoon, what would they be?
3 things. First, that the buyback announcement is not jeopardized or changed in any way. I think that would reflect badly. Second point being, what's the action plan on selecting new management? Are they going to do this committee business? Are they just going to select someone and move on? Third thing is I need to see a statement on where they stand with respect to Mr. Murthy's outbursts in public. if the board takes a stand and makes it very clear that they will not tolerate this kind of stuff for the next management, because what's happened with Vishal has happened, that is something that I'd like to see, or if they completely avoid the subject. I mean, either way, it's an indication of what they do. And fourth is their decisiveness in moving forward from here. I think there will always be a lot of questions about why he left and this and that. And I think a lot of issues about performance can be raised, a lot of issues about management styles can be raised. But your main view here is how do you move on? How do you ensure that the next person that comes in gets or succeeds, and is who all are getting involved in managing him? Is it just the board, or is it external shareholders as well?
You know, Deepak, just to go to the first or the second point that you made, I suspect there will be a search committee. I don't think that they're going to be able to take any kind of quick, immediate action in being able to appoint somebody unless they're very clear that the next person they want to appoint is someone from within. And then I would imagine UB Praveen Rao is the most likely candidate because he was the next in hierarchy after, Vishal Sikka. But given that they've made very clear in their statement to the exchanges and investors today that UB Praveen Rao only has temporary or interim powers, so to speak, as CEO and Managing Director, I think that they will appoint a search committee, and I think that the search committee will go through their 1 month, 2 month, or I would imagine a 1 month search process. And the question really is, how many people will want to apply to that search committee or want to be the next CEO and Managing Director of Infosys?
The press release also states that they have time till March of 2018 to find the new CEO. So they've given themselves that kind of window to say, so he's going to be interim CEO until that point in time, and Vishal Sikka stays on as executive chair until that point in time.
But would you have faith in a company that has seen so much bitterness? Where the man who was running the company is now in a vice chairman position, which is actually a titular position, but is executive, so it has powers. There are 2 chairmen, there is 1 interim managing director and CEO, and there is a search committee out there looking for people. So I would imagine, if that search committee has any sort of
locus standi,
cognizance of how horrible the situation is looking from the outside, that they will move fast.
But I think this position is also nominal. Frankly, it is executive. Yes, I agree. But if you read the letter, he's made it amply clear that he doesn't want to continue in any shape or form whatsoever. So maybe it's because of those clauses that Mohandas Pai was saying. But his letter makes it very clear that he can't continue creating value. If he can't create value as MD and CEO, he's not going to create value as the executive vice chairman.
I wonder.
So maybe that is the, what did you call it? Honorable exit that they're trying to give him after all of this now.
I wonder if some of the board members will continue to stay on. The guys who've sided with Vishal Sikka so far. Frankly, this is hugely disrespectful of the decision so far. The board will have to be reconstituted at some point in time. If this is the nature of, if this is going to be the new Infosys, where a clutch of shareholders from outside will have to control, they better come on the board or become, take executive chair positions.
Hey, Deepak, how would you react if you heard of one of the co-promoters coming back in any kind of executive or even non-executive but leadership position at Infosys? So for instance, I have no idea if there is any truth to this or not, but there has been some rumor mongering in the last few weeks that maybe Nandan Nilekani will come back. And I've been trying to reach Nandan since morning, but quite obviously he's not answering phone calls today. Do you think that would create a sense of confidence in the company and in the stock and in investors as well?
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, to be fair, none of them have been in the management position seat for very long, and they've not really expressed any kind of commentary. In fact, I think most of any of this has been driven by Mr. Murthy alone. There's not much of the other founders coming in. Mohandas Pai is not a founder, so I think he's part of the early management. I don't think he has that much of a say here. I would not expect any of them to want to come back. I don't think they have, they're current in any way in terms of operational dynamics of the company today to be able to come back and make a difference. It would be kind of weird for that to happen. I think Infi being this big a company, I'm sure they have a lot of talent, internally, and much of that needs to be motivated on a regular basis. I'm not sure how bringing in. I have no idea whether any of the other founders have expressed or want to be part of this, but I would be very surprised.
Deepak, we asked Mohandas Pai this morning if he would at all consider coming back, and he said he's enjoying his life right now and he has too many other exciting things going on. So you can strike Pai off the list. Or maybe,
Yeah,
I don't know.
so-
Because the last time I asked the head of any company whether he was going to retire or not,
said
AM
no.
Nayak, no, he said,
Hi.
I am going, come
yeah.
what may. And 2 months later, he didn't go anywhere, right? He stayed on. So, you know, I will look. But that's what Mr. Pai told me in the morning today, and we'll take that as at face value.
value.
I don't think Mr. Murthy wants to come back for a third time. So I wonder if Nandan wants to helm that, though he's been busy in the public policy space in a big way. So
there is
there's
a
no way to
large,
know.
one of the large AMCs in India, also a large shareholder of Infosys, spoke to us and mentioned these terms, so that it's a driverless ship, etc. The one thing that they mentioned was that if Nandan Nilekani comes back, then it could be a booster for the stock.
Oh, well,
No,
Just saying
you know,
what a large
I think
shareholder
it's
is saying.
just confidence that here is the person. The thing with Nanda was he was decisive. He was his own man. And with that, I think we have to toss it across to the conference call. Much as we want to talk more about this, this is the Infosys conference call that you're listening to.
Apologies again. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
An alert saying reconvene in 15 minutes. I don't want to speculate why, but maybe it's just a flood of people wanting to dial into that conference call, right?
Yes.
This is the news that most of us, you know, sort of dealt with first thing in the morning today, and investors across the world were trying to probably make sense of.
So just one additional point about CEO. I'm curious to what Deepak thinks of it as well. If this existing structure does not change, why will anybody sign up? If this board and a clutch of shareholders operating from outside, assuming Nandan or Praveen or whoever takes over the job, they'll face exactly the same challenges Vishal is facing today, right? Because they're not just answerable to the board, they're also answerable to a clutch of shareholders from outside. So unless the structure changes, in my mind, are they going to be able to attract?
How can you say that the structure will change? It's just
No, I'm saying, my argument is that why would they be able to attract good talent from outside or internally to take over this job in an awkward position like this, where there's a board and technically a shadow board as well, you know?
Yeah, well, sorry, comment coming in on Twitter. This is a former colleague of all of ours, Vikas Dandekar, saying, are Sikka and Mistry biosimilars? Well, it's a funny comment because, you know, he is probably the best pharmaceutical reporter we know out there, and it's a nice turn of phrase. A lot of what has happened this morning has reminded us of what happened at, you know, Bombay House not many months ago, where Cyrus Mistry was suddenly taken out of his executive position.
This is a Cyrus Mistry moment for Vishal Sikka, clearly.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, in that circumstance, and we were discussing this in the morning, Ira and I, no matter which side you are on or who you agree with, the fact is that there was no such leaking of letters. A majority shareholder in Tata Sons, you know, Ratan Tata, who was on the board of the Tata Trusts, felt that he was not happy with the performance of Cyrus Mistry and took the decision on behalf of Tata Trusts to get the board to ask him to go.
Right.
Now, however much of a surprise that would have come to Cyrus Mistry as, the fact is there was no this leaking, we don't like you, why did you do this? All of that happened post facto. When Cyrus Mistry hit back and saying, why are you asking me to go? You know, the problem actually lies at your end and not mine. And then we saw all the ugly, dirty laundry being hung out to dry. But at least when it happened there, it was just a shareholder exercising his shareholder rights and saying, I'm sorry, you need to go. And that's what the courts have recognized as well, saying you're a majority shareholder, you exercised your right.
True. You know, I just want to get in the stock angle out here or the markets angle out here. And Deepak, my question to you is, you know, from a perspective of somebody who is wanting or looking to invest at IT, if at all, in the first place, and the choices available, even if one does contemplate that, hey, IT may be a good 5-year, 10-year bet. Now, this bunch of these global companies, which are now as wanted as an Indian company, because Indian companies are no longer as wanted as they used to be. And then there are a slew of these Indian companies, mid-size or slightly larger size companies, which are doing reasonably well. HCL Tech, for example, the last 5 or 6 years has really turned on the charm and performed. Tech Mahindra is kind of shaping up well. Some of the mid-sized companies are doing well. Where does this leave a large investor if he wants to make a fresh investment into the IT space?
Well, you know, I think really that the big investments in the IT consultancy services space is probably not warranted in the first place. I think you've seen that from the likes of IBM, where even the Warren Buffett's cutting exposure. You're seeing that in, the HPDS kind of companies as well. You're seeing this in some of the larger IT companies worldwide. It's going to happen in India. We've got to reduce our expectations of returns, and therefore their P ratios and all that stuff will come down. These are cash-rich companies. They have cash flow. They don't have any debt. They don't. They are great, from a longer-term perspective in terms of steady growth, perhaps, but not the 20, 25, 30% growth we used to. We're going to have to live with that. Investors with that kind of a mindset will continue to buy these companies, like there are traditional IBM investors and Coal India investors, for instance. You don't expect a company to grow 20% at any point in time. So these are going to be that kind of thing. If you're looking at anything in this light, you would probably want it to be one of those big companies that people buy because of steady growth. Not unless it completely changes path. Now, never waste a good crisis. This is a good crisis for them. They can change the way they're perceived by completely making radical actions. I don't know if they have the gumption to do that. If they did it, they might place themselves on a higher pace.
That's very well said, Deepak. Never waste a good crisis, because that's exactly what happened at Bombay House. They were in crisis November, December, January, and then February. They found the right man to lead, at least the right man from all appearances of it, right? Chandra has done a fairly good job at TCS, a fabulous job, others might say.
Yes.
And he seems to be the right person from within the Tata Group, understands the culture. Hopefully he can see eye to eye with Ratan Tata. And I think eventually, we were asking the same questions of the Tata Group. Right then, saying who will come in as the next leader, who will come in knowing that Ratan Tata is constantly looking over their shoulder. But they found somebody that the market seems to have found confidence in, and somebody who seems to have a clear idea what he wants to do with the group going forward. So never waste a good crisis is a really good phrase to apply in this situation.
Chances are, I suppose, then an insider would be better positioned to understand and navigate the forces within the company as well. But the key point also is about this is not just one crisis, right? Look at it from a 5-year perspective. This has been a crisis year after year in this company. Right from the time when Shubhalal took over as CEO, and that was a good 4-5 years ago. You were expecting the company to stabilize at least after Murthy took over, and then the exit of Murthy happened, then there was a new chair on the board, and then Vishal Sikka was brought as a guy who was going to steady the ship. This was the Chandra moment that happened in 2013, expecting that the ship was going to be steady, and you're going to see this transformation happen, and embrace new technology and so on. And to be fair, Vishal Sikka talked the talk. He talked like a technology CEO. He positioned himself in the valley. I'm not so sure if he achieved all that he set out to achieve. But if one thought that the crisis was over, one thought that the ship was stabilized, and here again you're back to square one, and the company is staring down at a situation where even their sort of well-decorated questions of or culture of corporate governance is being questioned quite seriously, and they don't have a leader to lead, and their board has lost confidence. So I don't know where this story is going to go from here.
Yeah, well, as we said, the quotes by the board as well. This is the board saying that they are as distressed. I mean, I think there is a bit of a commonality between what Vishal Sikka has written in his letter and what the board is writing in his letter, that the constant barrage of attacks that were made is distressing. I mean, Vishal Sikka said he's distressed. The board is saying as much as well, and which brings into question, I think, what the point that Harsha was saying. I mean, he's spoken to a few board members, yes. I don't know if they have kind of said this, Harsha. But yeah, there could be some question marks on the board remaining as it is 6 months down the line.
I mean, that's my hunch. I don't want to sort of speculate beyond a point. But think about it. If you're a member of the board today and you've reposed confidence in Vishal Sikka time and again, and yet despite your best efforts and despite the fact that you've backed the CEO to take his decisions and take the business forward in one direction, the CEO has not been sacked by the board. He's not quit because the board is unhappy with him. He's quit because of factors that is beyond control of either the board or his performance. So what confidence does the board, a member of the board have? Yeah. Particularly the guy who believes that Vishal Sikka has done a good job. Why would you stay on the board?
Okay, if you've just joined us, and that's possibly likely, and if you've only just woken up in the day, then the breaking news this morning is that Vishal Sikka, the Managing Director and CEO of Infosys, has stepped down from that position. He will now continue as Executive Vice Chairman. Meanwhile, the company has appointed his next in charge, UB Praveen Rao, as the Interim Managing Director and CEO, and the company intends to now look for another leader to take his place, that is Sikka's place. Through the course of the morning, we've seen a quick announcement by the company to the stock exchanges, a letter from the board, quotes of which you will see, sort of play out on your screen as we continue our discussion, and a fairly wounded Vishal Sikka writing a letter as well, denouncing the distractions of the continuous allegations against him and saying that he could not continue in this position any longer, and that he tried very hard and he was very excited about the role that he was given at Infosys, but unfortunately it was not to be. It has been a tumultuous morning. The stock was down about 6% or so.
7% down even now.
7% or so at this point in time, and we're waiting to hear more from the company on what the road ahead will be. There is a conference call that was supposed to start at 11 o'clock. Instead, it's going to now start at 11:30, which is a few moments from now, and the company has also said that it will be doing an interaction with the media this afternoon. If you would like to send us your comments on Infosys, then send them to Bloomberg Quint. That's at Bloomberg Quint is our Twitter handle. At Menaka Doshi is mine. Neeraj and Harsha will tell you theirs in just a few seconds. And while they're sort of coming to that, I should read out some comments that are appearing on Twitter and what is being said about Infosys in the Twitter sphere. Ajit Ranade, a well-known economist with the Aditya Birla Group, saying, introduce a new coin and then demonetize it. Infosys, hashtag Sikka in Hindi. Harsha Bhogle, a well-known sports commentator, especially cricket, saying, wow, so Infosys, the company I have always believed stood for what India could achieve, stumbles onto another crisis.
Okay, before we move on to the next quote, Anand Mahindra is quoting Harsha Bhogle's tweet and tweeting out, saying that crises are like furnace that forges more durable steel. Infy is iconic and will always have people cheering for it. I certainly will. He's quoted Harsha Bhogle's tweet and tweeted.
Well, that's nice. It's a nice note of confidence that Anand Mahindra has struck, and you would expect nothing else from Mr. Mahindra in a moment of crisis as thus. Harsh Goenka, another well-known industrialist, often known for his tongue-in-cheek tweets, has said this morning, post-demonetization, old Sikkas not working, Sikkas being coins in Hindi, Vishal change in Infosys. Vishal in Hindi is expansive. Old guard wins. That's the quote from Harsh Goenka. A lot of quotes coming in from unknown people on Twitter. So for instance, one person saying Vishal Sikka will now know how hard it is to transfer his PF account. I don't think that's on his top list of worries at this point in time. Somebody else coming in, Nation First, saying Vishal Sikka's resignation was much needed in Infosys to reinvent glorious days of Narayan Murthy as its CEO. So there are those that feel that Sikka's departure will mean the return of some of the earlier founders and will mean a new phase for the company. Another reporter or journalist quoted here with saying, with age comes wisdom, but sometimes age comes alone. That seems to be a comment on some of the founders here. There is more. Vishal Sikka resigns. So sorry for Infosys. Narayan Murthy should take the blame. Too much meddling, like a bad mother-in-law. Unprofessional. I'm just reading out some comments from Twitter on this crisis, and the only reason why we're doing this in an unfiltered fashion is because, like we said all along, this has been one of India's outstanding companies, a hallmark of corporate governance, and the events of the last few months and this morning have undermined everything Infosys has stood for. For a very, very long time. And while Mr. Mahindra says he's hopeful of better times to come, and we join him in that hope, these are the comments coming in.
I was just reading Vishal Sikka's blog that he's put out on his blog page. It's a fairly detailed, a little more detailed than his resignation letter to the board, where he's sort of thanked a bunch of people, particularly his team members, for the sort of contribution that they've made so far. And I just want to sort of read one quote that's perhaps gives a sense of what the thinking in his mind. He says, and I don't know where this quote is from, it says, your time is limited, don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other opinions drown your inner voice. This is a hurt man. It's very clearly that he's clearly loved what he's doing and believe that he's been adding value. And this is not an exit that he's obviously it's not a completion of a job, it's a forced exit.
I think we have a brokerage comment coming in saying, going ahead, we believe Infosys will find it difficult to attract external talent to replace Dr. Vishal Sikka due to the experience of tussle between founders and management. In our view, bringing back Nandan Nilekani, assuming that those rumors come true, will provide the stock temporary respite only but unlikely to deliver operational outperformance. Brokerage is also concerned about what happens to the dividend, to the buyback that is pending, and the decision on that, which was supposed to be taking place tomorrow.
Yeah, this is the biggest near-term trigger. So if the buyback stays on course, you would probably expect small retail investors to be happy. They get to buy the stock at a cheaper price and tender in. So all of that is fine. But yeah, the question mark always remains over what happens to the.
So they have not announced what premium they'd be doing the buyback at.
Nothing as yet.
I mean, I wonder if there'll be a flood of investors wanting to sell their shares if they do announce a premium to the current market price. Right?
What would institutions be thinking now? Somebody who's been a long-term Infosys backer, would they have a change of heart of investing per se?
So as we spoke to two large asset management companies, one large insurance company, and everybody had different views. So one person actually quite said that I think Infosys will get reduced to being a stock that is owned for its weightage on the index. Beyond that, there will not be any kind of buying that will be done. But I think most people have said that it depends, it remains to be seen as to who comes in next, as difficult as the position is. But if indeed, I mean, most people are indeed very hopeful of Nandan Nilekani. I mean, hopeful about the stock doing okay if Nandan Nilekani does come back in whichever shape or form.
The other hit, of course, and we've been talking about culture and so on, but the other big one is the hit on reputation. Think about it. Again, this is a company that we've spoken about of exalted governance and so on. But the reputational risk this company faces right now is fairly large. And, it obviously, we are getting a...
Hey, 1 minute, guys. We've just got a comment coming in from Infosys, and it looks like this battle has taken one more turn. The standoff, now in sharper focus. Infosys press release saying it has come to the attention of the board that a letter authored by Mr. Murthy, the founder of Infosys, has been released to various media houses, attacking the integrity of the board and the management of the company, alleging falling corporate governance standards in the company. The board takes great umbrage to the contents of the letter and places on record the following. Mr. Murthy's continuous assault, including this latest letter. This letter, by the way, was in the Mint this morning, in case you missed that story. Mr. Murthy's continuous assault is the primary reason that CEO Dr. Vishal Sikka has resigned, despite strong board support. Mr. Murthy's letter contains factual inaccuracies, already disproved rumors and statements extracted out of context from his conversations with board members. I'm going to pause here just to tell you, in case you've missed this story since morning, the Mint ran a story suggesting that Narayan Murthy, in an email to some of his advisors, had said that directors on the board of Infosys, including Ravi Venkatesan, who's co-chairman, thought that Vishal Sikka was not CEO material, he was CTO material. And then the letter goes on to say that there was a lack of confidence in Vishal Sikka's leadership ability. I'm paraphrasing there because I don't want to read out the story from the morning. I want to read out to you Infosys' press release. The press release continues to say the board assures its shareholders, employees, customers and communities that it is committed not to be distracted by this misguided campaign of Mr. Murthy and will continue to adhere to the highest international standards of corporate governance. Mr. Murthy's campaign against the board and the company has had the unfortunate effect to undermine the company's efforts to transform itself. The board has been engaged in a dialogue with the founder to resolve his concerns over the course of a year, trying earnestly to find feasible solutions within the boundaries of law and without compromising its independence. These dialogues have not been successful. This is the board saying we tried to mend fences with Narayan Murthy, but those efforts were not successful. The board declines to speculate about Mr. Murthy's motive for carrying out this campaign, including the latest letter. The board believes it must set the record straight on the false and misleading charges made by Mr. Murthy because his actions and demands are damaging the company. It then goes on to state a series of facts that is exactly, those are some of the issues that Mr. Murthy had raised in the last several months. This is the press release just coming in from Infosys, and here is the conference call that the company has just begun.
Ravi Venkatesan, co-chairman of the board, Dr. Vishal Sikka, executive vice chairman, Mr. Praveen Rao, interim managing director and CEO, Mr. M.D. Ranganath, CFO, and other members of the board and the management team. We'll start the call with some remarks by Mr. Ravi Venkatesan, Dr. Sikka, and Mr. Rao, subsequent to which we'll open up the call for questions. Please note that anything which we say, which refers to our outlook for the future, is a forward-looking statement, which must be read in conjunction with the risks that the company faces. A full statement and explanation of these risks is available in our filings with the SEC, which can be found on www.sec.gov. I'd now like to pass it on to Mr. Ravi Venkatesan.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining this call. This is Ravi Venkatesan. At the board of Infosys this morning, with great regret and sadness, considered and then accepted the resignation of Vishal Sikka as the Managing Director and CEO. Vishal is on the call, and shortly he will share his own reasons for coming to this decision. The board, completely understands and acknowledges his reasons, but we are extremely distressed and saddened by the circumstances and the final decision. In particular, we are highly distressed by the continuing allegations against both Dr. Sikka as well as members of the board. We have repeatedly called out the fact that we have had not one, but 3 independent investigations in all the unsubstantiated claims and allegations. And none of the investigations have found any evidence whatsoever to substantiate any of the allegations. But as a result of all this, there has been substantial damage to the morale, and it has finally culminated in the departure of Vishal as CEO. I want, on behalf of all my colleagues on the board, to thank Dr. Sikka for his leadership of the company during these 3 years. In one of my earlier interviews this year, I said, I thank Vishal for making Infosys relevant again. This is a time of great industry transition. And I think Vishal did a great deal personally to paint an exciting vision for the future of the industry and Infosys' place in it. And we will remain grateful for that. In the 3 years, Vishal and his leadership team have also worked tirelessly to plant the seed for the transformation of the company. And we're beginning to see evidence of lots of green shoots. And hopefully, these will bear fruit fairly soon. The board has been very grateful in Dr. Sikka's agreement to continue to provide support to the board and the management in ensuring a smooth transition. Vishal has been appointed Executive Vice Chairman of the company effective today and will hold this office until we find a permanent Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director, which should be no later than 31st March of 2018. During this period, Vishal has agreed that he will focus most on strategic initiatives, on continuing to hold key client relationships, which he excels at, and to make sure that technology development continues. We're also grateful that Praveen Rao has agreed to step up to the role of the Interim Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director, and he will report to Vishal and, of course, work with the whole board. There are a couple of things I want to say before we open it up, before I hand it over to Vishal. The board is incredibly committed to the strategic direction that has been articulated by Vishal and on the transformation journey that we have embarked on. There is no question of that. And so I'm sure we'll have opportunities to discuss continuity. We've also entrusted the Nominations and Remuneration Committee of the board to start work immediately on the task of finding a successor to Dr. Sikka. And obviously, the NRC will look at the talent we have within the company as well as externally in this process. So those are simply some opening remarks. I would now like to turn it over to Vishal.
Thanks so much, Ravi. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. First of all, I want to say thanks for last 3 years of really wonderful support from all of you and all of your commitment. I'm really proud of what we have achieved in the last 3 years. As many of you have heard me say over these years that our industry is going through a very significant shift. it is driven by automation. It is driven by a very pervasive digitization. And in this time, to the endeavor of our company is to go from a company where we specialize in a global delivery model where we take a cost-oriented approach to value delivery of things that our clients do already, towards a model where we provide a value-oriented and innovation-oriented value delivery to our clients. We deliver things that nobody could do, and we bring especially automation to dramatically improve the productivity of the work that we do, to outpace the commoditization. And in parallel to that, we deliver innovation, meaning you don't just do the work that was happening before, but you do something that nobody else could do. So that has been the endeavor, and I'm really proud of the results that we have achieved, that our team has achieved. Praveen, Ranga, Ravi, Mohit, Rajesh, our entire team, Deepak, Parvinder, our delivery leadership, our sales leadership. If you look at the last 3 years, beyond the new services and the new software and zero distance and some of these fundamental innovative things that we have done that without losing focus on the underlying execution. And the company has done an extraordinarily good job, in my view, in that. When I started, our growth rate was not so good. It was half to one-third of the industry's growth rate. Attrition was extremely high. The senior management team was quite new. And that quarter when I started, we did something like 2.1 billion in revenue in that June 2014 quarter, Q1 of fiscal 15. And 3 years later, in the previous quarter, we did 265. So that was a pretty nice growth, and both in FY16 and FY17. In FY16, we were the industry-leading growth company, and in FY17, we came, with the exception of Cognizant, if you include the inorganic. If you actually exclude the inorganic, we were the industry-leading again in FY17. And then we did that while keeping a very steadfast focus on margins. Last quarter, we did it 24.1. It was the first time in 5 years that we have beaten TCS in margins. And our utilization was at a 10-year high this past quarter. The utilization, including freshers, was at an all-time high. And the attrition has come down. In fact, Praveen and I don't even measure the regular attrition anymore. We only measure the high-performer attrition for the last 4 or 5 quarters, which is now basically in single digits. And if you look at our clients, we went from 12 $100 million clients when I started to 19. And large deals have gone from 1.9 billion that quarter when I joined to 3.5 billion from FY15 to FY17. What I'm most proud of is the work that Ranga and the team have done in cash generation. And, when I started, the liquid assets were, including cash and cash equivalents, were somewhere around 4.9 billion, and now we are at a little bit more than 6.05. And this despite about 20,000 crore rupees or 2.85 billion in dividends, which we have done over the last 3 years collectively. So I'm really proud of the achievement. But even more than these numbers, and the numbers are more consequences of what we have done, it is really the underlying achievement, whether it is in creating a culture of innovation with zero distance. I mentioned fresher utilization earlier being all-time high. That is singularly because of zero bench. There are now close to 50,000 jobs on zero bench, and our bench is about 9,000 people. And so this is the reason that the freshers get an opportunity to work on things which gives them experience, gets them to break their cycle, and get into the workforce. And of course, the software business, the homegrown Edge and Nia, and the acquired Panaya and Scava have formed an integral part of our work. Now it is 1.5, 1.6% of the revenue last quarter just from this new software that did not exist 2 years ago. And similarly, we have launched over the last 2 years or so 25 new services, which now represents 8.3% of our revenue. And we are counting on really rapid growth. So I'm really proud of these achievements, especially where we were compared to where we were 3 years ago. And the reality is that the disruption that I saw in the industry and the opportunity to transform the company from a culture of cost-oriented delivery towards creating a culture of innovation that is a widespread innovation culture is something that I was really excited about, that I thought was something it would be wonderful to go after that kind of a challenge. And over the last year, when you look at Brexit or President Trump's election, the visa situation, the geopolitical situation, this was some unexpected headwinds. We had our situation with RBS and others. And this is also something that as a CEO you can deal with. And you can say that, this is, okay, we are in this job and this is something that is impacting everybody else in the world. And so we have to address that. In fact, it even becomes something fun, something challenging, something exciting to go after. And Ravi Kumar and I were talking earlier about the plan that we put together over the last 1 year. And people say it is because of the visa stuff, but the local hiring that we are doing here in the U.S. is something that we started 18 months ago. In fact, we had started 3 years ago with the first plan to hire 2,500 or so people locally back in the fall of 2014. And then we started our U.S. foundation. And the third logical step of that was the hiring of the 10,000 people in the U.S. And that sort of thing is something, those kinds of headwinds, those kinds of challenges you can deal with. But what's been going on over the last, 4 or 5 quarters, and especially over the last, since February of this past year or January of this past year, is really, there have been this continuous drumbeat of these allegations and news stories and the same stuff about Rajiv's separation and Panaya and all of this stuff over and over and over and over and over again. It is absolutely sickening. And what it does is, every day you wake up, whenever I'm home in California, you wake up in the morning and there is some news story or the other asking basically a 4,000th regurgitation of the same nonsense. And it is, at some point you just say that, this is too much. And I found that I was spending way too much time on dealing with those things. But even that is a surface damage. This is responding to the noise, responding to the chaos on the surface. What it does is it makes it difficult to carry out the change agenda. You're talking about creating a culture where we have right now, as I speak to you, something like 9,500 projects in the company. And this is we have been working, Praveen, myself, Ranga, Ravi, to create a culture where these 9,500 projects can think of themselves as 9,500 entrepreneurs. And the Zero Distance Initiative is about that. And so it slows down your ability to make that kind of a change happen. And that is a disservice to the company, that is a disservice to the job. It prevents us from creating value. It just creates a sort of a negative environment overall in which to do our work. And so I've been thinking about that for some time. I had 2 long meetings with Ravi since he became co-chair over the last couple of months. Sesh has been here in California the last couple of weeks, so I have met him 6 or 7 times. And finally, I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. And over the last few days, I've been thinking this through with the board to see what could be done here. And finally, we came to the conclusion earlier today, like Ravi said, that I just cannot do this anymore and I want to leave. And I'm very thankful that the board has asked me to be the executive vice chair, and I'm looking forward to that. As we look at, now if you look at our commitment, I'm here, I'm the executive vice chair, I'm going to stay until the 31st of March or until a great stable management team is established. Praveen is here, Ranga, Ravi, Mohit, Rajesh, our entire leadership team. And we had an extraordinary performance in Q1, despite the distractions and so forth. I'm really proud of what the team delivered. You know, we did 2651 in reported revenue and 24.1 margin and all-time high, basically close to all-time high in utilization, and 6 quarters in a row we improved revenue per employee. So that is a reflection that our team is absolutely focused on execution. And I want to assure you that this quarter, the Q2, is the same absolute resolute focus on execution. That's what we are continuing to work on. Every day, Ravi and Mohit and Rajesh and Praveen and I do these calls with the teams, and we are focused on cash generation. As you know, Ranga will talk about this in a little bit. We have talked about we are working on the buyback. We got the regulatory approvals for that. And being a 17% ADR holder, we are the only Indian company which has more than 10% of holdings in ADR. So we are governed by multiple regulatory regimes in different ways. And so Ranga has been working incredibly hard getting this done over the last several months. I mean, I take my hats off to Ranga and to his team for the work that they have done to make this happen. So we are absolutely focused on Q2 and on the rest of this year. We have this dual challenge of continuing the operational efficiency and execution focus while growing the new services and new software businesses in a fundamental way. And Praveen and I are going to start working with our clients. Ravi and Sesh and Praveen, Ranga and I are going to work with our investors over the next few weeks. So all is well. We are going to have a absolutely smooth and issue-free transition here. And the board, the leadership, Praveen, Ranga, Ravi, Mohit, Rajesh, everybody is committed to the direction that we are going in. And I am here. And in the interim setup that the board has put together, Praveen will continue to report to me. And so this is what I want to share. And perhaps I can request Praveen and Ranga to say a few things, and then we can perhaps take some questions from you.
Thanks, Vishal. As I echo comments made by Ravi and Vishal as well, it's unfortunate development, but we are focused on dealing with it and moving forward. As we have done in the last few quarters, our team is fully engaged in execution. We'll focus on delivering on Q2 and rest of the year. We will ensure that we have extra focus on all our engagement with all the stakeholders, clients, investors, employees as well during this difficult period. We have a very strong leadership team, and my belief is that, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to continue our focus on execution. We have a very strong vision, and we have seen the vision deliver fairly good performance over the last several quarters. So we just need to focus on executing and delivering on the vision. And with the backing of the strong leadership team that we have in place, I'm very confident that we will deliver on the current quarter and rest of the year. Ranga?
Thanks, Vishal. Thanks, Praveen. First of all, thanks, Vishal, for your kind words. And as both Vishal and Praveen said, we are focusing on execution. And as you know, on August 16th, we announced saying that the board will be meeting on August 19th to consider the buyback of equity shares. I think that board meeting is scheduled for August 19th. So I think the focus continues to be on strategy execution, as Vishal and Praveen said, and we are all going to work as a team focusing on the execution.
Aruna, we can open up the call for questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin with the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on your touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. Thank you. first question is from the line of Sandeep Agarwal from Edelweiss. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. And one question to...
excuse me, this is the operator. Mr. Agarwal, can you come closer to the phone, please?
Yeah,
Thank you.
one question to Vishal and then one question to Ravi. So first of all, Vishal, I remember you clearly saying once that, the passion with which people join Infosys is something which, drives the reason you being in Infosys, and that was probably one of the reasons why you joined Infosys. So I just wanted to understand that, given such an excellent performance since you joined on all parameters, don't you think that means, I understand the distractions were too much, but do you think that your incredible work would have automatically, slowed them down over a period of time? And we already have a very good track record of 8-9 quarters of excellent performance since you joined. While everyone was losing a bit per employee and all those things, we were gaining on those parameters. So I just wanted to understand, wouldn't that would have automatically slowed down these noises? And to Ravi, I know it is too early. Just wanted to understand what will be the priority. Like, would you like to, bring in some international tech CEO or something like that, or you would like to, again, look after people who had probably been part of Infosys in past? So, what will be the strategy and how you are looking at it?
So, first of all, from my side, Rakesh, we thought about it, and over the last few days, together with the board and especially with Sesh and I, we discussed this. It hasn't gone away the last 5 quarters or so, and it has just gotten worse. And it has gotten increasingly malicious and personal. And so this is just I just felt that in the end, the company's performance, the company is bigger than all of us. The company is stronger than all of us. The company will live longer than all of us. And therefore, the institution comes first. And that is what has to be done. And we cannot, frankly, everyone on the board really asked me to reconsider this. And that was one of the key arguments. I know Ravi mentioned this to me, and Sesh mentioned this to me, that look, Vishal, Ranga mentioned this to me, that with performance, things will slow down and so forth. But it is not only that things would slow down, which they were not showing any indication of, but it hurts performance. Some of these stories in the media are completely nonsensical. And like Ravi said earlier, some of these allegations, we have had those investigated over and over again by different people and spent tons of money doing these. And at some point, you just have to say that, it drains so much energy, and it does not create an atmosphere that is conducive to transformation. And frankly, every day that goes by, it is not that the world is standing still. You get deeper in the hole. So this has to be done, and I just felt like this was the time to do it.
Let me take the second question. In terms of priorities, obviously making sure that in spite of all that is happening, the management team stays focused on delivering a strong Q2 is top priority, and the board will do everything necessary to support the team in accomplishing that. You asked a question about CEO succession. I think that's an incredibly important one, and we have to get that right. Clearly, we are going to apply our minds to that, but we need somebody who is transformational. I think that has become clearer and clearer to us over these 3 years, that the industry is changing at an accelerating rate, and all of us have to move faster and to embrace new things. So we need a person with the transformational mindset who shares this vision. We cannot afford to go, do a reset on the strategy or go back on it. We need somebody. This is a large company. It is incredibly complex. It has 200,000 people spread out across the world. So the leader has to be like Vishal was and is, somebody with an incredible people connection, okay, and because you have to take the whole complex system along. Now, I told you that we have some real strong leaders coming up inside, and we obviously will look at these people. We'll have to look outside. But Infosys has also got an incredibly strong culture. And so the challenge for anybody coming from the outside, as Vishal experienced, is to manage those cultural adaptations. First, you have to ingratiate yourself into the culture and then transform it in the ways that you see necessary. And so I think it's going to be not just important, but challenging to find the right candidate. The board is hopeful and optimistic, and in our discussions with Vishal, I think he also said he shared our optimism that this is still an iconic company because Vishal sowed the seeds for transformation 3 years ago. We are arguably a little further ahead in our transformation than many of your peers and competitors. Surely that will be an attraction. So we are still hopeful that we will find someone great to fill Vishal's shoes. Also, this is going to take time. These things don't happen overnight. And we hope in this period, some of the founder-related issues can be put decisively to bed so that the next person has a calmer time.
Okay, thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Anantha Narayanan from Credit Suisse. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions as well. But before that, Vishal, just wanted to thank you for all the insights you've given us in the past 3 years. I think it's a pity the way you had to leave, but please accept our best wishes for whatever you choose to do in the future. And coming to my questions, the first one was to Praveen. Praveen, this will clearly, I think, create a lot of water cooler chat within the company for the next few weeks. And I'm sure, even customers will be wondering as to what's really happening out here. So as investors, should we be sort of prepared for any sort of near-term disruption at all? And if not, are there any specific steps that you intend to take over the next few days, both with employees and with customers? That was the first question. The second one was to Ravi. So Ravi, I think you just mentioned this in your previous response as well. But do you foresee any threat to the ability of the board of attracting external candidates, just given all the noise between the promoter and the board? And is there any way that you can mitigate this threat? Thank you.
Hey Anant, thanks so much for the kind words, man. I really appreciate it. And like Ravi said earlier, I want to make it and give you a very, very clear assurance that I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. We are going to see this through, and the clients will not see a disruption. The management team will go about this in a very systematic way and a very smooth way. And Praveen and I are going to start talking to the top 100 or so clients starting this weekend. And already a couple of them have called me in the last couple of hours, and I have a whole slate of meetings tomorrow here in California and so forth. So I want to assure all of you that and there is nothing abrupt about this. It's the announcement. I think you have to do it in the way that we have done it. But the business continues. This is an iconic company, and it is bigger than all of us, and it's going to continue. And so I just want to assure everybody about that.
Yeah, Anant, this is Praveen here, and just to add what Vishal has said, he will be around at least for the next 9 months or till the new management team is in place, and we'll do to make sure that the succession is smooth. While in the short term, there will bound to be some distractions, some noise, and this is something probably a continuation of what we have seen in the last few months. There is no easy solution. We have to keep on communicating with all the stakeholders, employees, clients, investors, and so on, and just focus on execution. Because at the end of the day, once you start performing and once you start focusing on the results and outcomes, then many of this will die away. So we have to probably spend a little bit more extra focus or attention on communication. There is no shortcuts, to be honest. But in some sense, it's a continuation of some of the distractions we have seen in the recent past, and that's something we need to continue to address. And I'm very happy that Vishal is still around for the foreseeable future, and we are very optimistic that we should be able to manage this transition in a relatively smooth manner.
So should I try and answer the question on the CEO search? I think you're right. It is not going to be easy. On the plus side, we have the Infi sort of brand and magic, and I still believe that it's strong. I think we have momentum in the business. We have a lot of the exciting aspects of transformation which are beginning to become evident. We have a good team. This event has brought the board together in a cohesive way, which is just fantastic. And so hopefully, any future CEO will sense that and be, draw courage from that. I think the clear sort of worry would be is the founder issue been put to bed or not. I think we've reached a point clearly where we know that it cannot continue in this fashion. I'm always an optimist, and I believe that in the coming weeks we'll have to find ways to put that decisively to bed, so that by the time we have a couple of viable candidates, hopefully there is more stability around that issue. We'll work hard to ensure that. And as Vishal said, he's going to be part of that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Ravi Menon from Elara Securities. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. May I first say that, on Dr. Sikka, we have seen Infosys incremental revenue market share significantly. And, we hope that we are not going to see that, kind of weaken as he leaves the company. And I have a question about what would you say to the clients who have embraced the platforms, like Mana and Nia, or even Panaya and Skava? How would you convince them that there is still a product roadmap because, there must have been a vision when you started these, and now, now there is a finite end to Dr. Sikka's term here. How would you convince clients that, who've put their dollars into it and, who also invested time into this, that, they will still have something that's relevant?
I just want to reiterate that I'm still here to help guide along the change, and especially the work that we have been doing with the clients. The software business is, in fact, the three of the leaders of the software business are sitting here with me as I speak. Naveen, who's our CTO, and Abdul, who runs the platform business, and Sudhir, who runs all the product management. We have a very strong team led by Parvinder, and the software business is something. Don't forget that the software business at Infosys is something that was there before Vishal Sikka came in. Pinnacle has been around for a long time. I'm really proud of what we have done with Pinnacle. In fact, for one of the huge telcos, we recently, which is also getting into payments through a payment bank, recently, this was one of the last technical reviews I have had in the last few weeks. We just launched a 36,000 transactions per second deployment of Pinnacle. And this was, compared to where Pinnacle was 3 years ago as a product, this is something that we are incredibly proud of, to help such a massive scale deployment of Pinnacle. We deployed Pinnacle at the Department of Post, when all the post offices became bank branches, and with a massive deployment. So that is something. Pinnacle has been around for decades in the company. And EdgeWorld was founded before I got here. Of course, we have completely revamped the product line. All the products, in fact, that are continuing are completely new now. And Nia was built from scratch over the last 2.5 years, close to 3 years. In October, I remember we launched the Infosys Information Platform, October of 2014. So it's soon going to be 3 years since that. And of course, Panaya and Skava. I just met with the Skava leadership team yesterday here in California, and Panaya is doing extremely well. In fact, you hear Panaya, unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons in the news. But Panaya has become such an integral part of our work that it is, you simply cannot go to an SAP or an Oracle upgrade project without Panaya in the mix. It is such a differentiator. So it's a very integral part of the work that we do. Ravi and his team have just launched a NIA Automation Center, which is a enablement of NIA for all our service lines at a massive scale. We have launched a special zero distance version just for NIA adoption. So these are all structural things around how these products are becoming an integral part of the company. And so I'm not worried about that roadmap at all. And it is something, I mean, this company does an exemplary job of maintaining other people's products, so I have no doubt that we can maintain our own.
So, you all due respect, I mean, whatever you said, I mean, actually makes me feel more that your vision is essential to the future of these products. I think that the difference is achieved because of these initiatives that were taken.
Excuse me, this is the operator. So your voice is breaking up. We can't hear you clearly. We still can't hear you, Mr. Menon. Okay, we take the next question in the meanwhile from the line of Viju George from JP Morgan. Please go ahead. Viju George from JP Morgan, your line is unmuted. You may go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, thank you for taking my questions. I think most of my questions have been answered, but I'd like to specifically, thank Vishal for his contribution to Infosys and to the evolution of our thought process as well over the last 3 years. Wish you all the best, Vishal. I have a question for Ravi, if I may. Ravi, I think Vishal has already articulated, his strategic vision for the company quite candidly, quite clearly over the last 3 years repeatedly. If a new candidate were to come in and maybe change elements of that or drastically rehaul that, how open are you to that? That's my question, really. In other words, should we expect an about turn, from all that Vishal stood for, potentially in the new candidate, in case the thought process is different?
Absolutely, emphatically not. Vishal, this is no longer just Vishal's vision. It started out that way, but over the last 3 years, I think many of us have engaged in and now this is very much institutionalized. This is now Infosys vision, and Vishal, thank you for embedding it deeply. I think the management team buys into it. The board completely endorses it. In particular, a few months ago, the board constituted what's called a committee of directors, led by Sesh, our chairman, Prahlad, and myself. And through that COD, we've engaged very deeply with Vishal and the management team in shaping it and helping accelerate the execution of it. So I think there is now institutional commitment to this direction. So I don't think there is any risk of rollback. However, strategy is emergent. The world changes, you learn new things, and therefore there is course corrections that you make, and we expect that will be a natural part of the evolution of this strategy. But no, we are utterly committed to it. I've been, beyond Vishal's own tremendous articulations of the industry change and Infosys direction, I myself have, been writing from time to time. You can refer to my article about the Kodak moment. I think it should give you some comfort that I, Sesh, the whole board, and the whole management team is bought into this direction.
Sure. And I think Ananta also raised this question about how you would be able to attract a proven talent, a transformational talent from outside, given what has happened. My question is that despite the best efforts of the board to repeatedly assuage the concerns of the founder member team on various counts, and having gone out of your way to do that, what makes us, what can give us the assurance that certain issues may not arise even in newer cases, and even if you go out of way to satisfy those concerns, those issues won't keep cropping up. That's probably the more worrying aspect here.
I think that's a fair question. Over the last year, the board has engaged in dialogue with the founder and the founders to understand real concerns and address them, find solutions within the boundaries of the law, as well as without compromising our independence. We think we've done everything that is reasonable, but at some point, being an independent board, we make our own decisions. That has not gone over particularly well, as you can see. We've reached a situation which is not tenable, okay? And so we have to find some permanent solution that gives Infosys stability and the new CEO and the management team the opportunity to focus on driving this, both the execution and transformation. What exactly that's going to look like, I'm not in a position to sit here today and articulate, but we will have to find stability. And meanwhile, as an independent board, we have to give management the full support that they deserve and the air cover that they deserve to execute. Hopefully, by the time we have candidates for Vishal's successor, there is greater stability than we have this morning.
Sure, thank you and all the best.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Yogesh Agarwal from HSBC. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Vishal, firstly, it's unfortunate you are leaving at this stage of the transformation journey. We certainly miss your enthusiasm and passion for technology. I have just a question for Ravi. Ravi, I understand Vishal is leaving because of the MURTHY default, as you mentioned in the press release as well. But from a legal perspective, what are the powers Infosys and the board has to provide independence to the new CEO as well? Because a similar thing can arise going forward, that MURTHY isn't happy with certain steps of the new CEO, and we go through the vicious cycle. So, as a board and as the company head, how would you prevent that happening again?
I think it's a fair question. We have to, it's a reality that we have a strategy and we have to execute on the strategy. This strategy calls for us to take some bets, and sometimes some of the bets will come through and sometimes it may not come through, but we have to have a leap of faith. We have to stay focused. We have to focus on the outcomes, and in any outcome, there will be intermediate milestones. I'm very optimistic that as long as we are able to demonstrate steady progress towards the outcome, we should be able to deliver. What has happened is an unfortunate thing. There is, again, no guarantee that these things will not repeat. But as Ravi had said earlier, reiterated earlier, they will continue, the board will continue their efforts in terms of trying to find a final solution to this, so that not only for me as an interim CEO, but for whoever new management team coming in future, that this thing is of the past. That is the hope, at least. But end of the day, we have to do what is really required, because it's an iconic company. The industry is going through transformation. We have a great opportunity to transform the company and take it to the next century. So from that perspective, we can't control we can't really worry about what is not in your control. We just have to focus on doing the right things, what is right for the company, what is right for all the stakeholders. And I'm very hopeful that we'll be allowed to do and focus on that.
Yeah, that was Praveen. Ravi here. What I would say is, at the end of the day, investor confidence is crucial. And, our theory has been that performance is what will continue to earn the confidence of all of you. And so as long as the board enjoys that investor confidence, we are quite hopeful and optimistic about being able to stay the course.
Yeah, just to add, this is Ranga here, to what both Praveen and Ravi said. I think if you look at the purely financial standpoint, if you look at our balance sheet, it was never stronger than it is today. More than, as Vishal said, more than 40,000 crores of cash balance, highest ever, and we're also focusing on some of the buyback announcement, etc. Then the cash generation, even last quarter, was a net profit to cash conversion is higher. We've been holding margins steady despite other things. I think the focus of the management team continues to be, as both Vishal and Praveen said, will be on execution and making sure that we focus on the clients, on employees, and our execution, the new services, which was 8.3% of revenue last quarter we reported, and that continues to be our focus. And from the balance sheet was never stronger than it is today, from whichever angle if you look at it. So we continue to focus on execution.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Pankaj Kapoor from JM Financial. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My question actually is for Ravi. Ravi, in a recent interview, you mentioned that the board is open to giving a formal role to Mr. Murthy. So after today's development, is that something which is on the board's agenda? And given that the concerns that he has repeatedly raised are actually more around the governance, should we expect some changes in the board as well? Thank you.
That's a good question. As we just put out a release shortly before the call, and in that we stated that given the commitment of the board to remain independent and pursue the strategy that we have chosen, at this point the board has no intention of inviting Mr. Murthy to play a formal role in the governance of the company.
Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Divya Nagarajan from UBS. Please go ahead.
Hi, I think the most important question just got answered, but I'd like to thank Vishal for his contributions. It's been very interesting to hear your very dramatically different thoughts on the industry, and we do hope and wish you great success going forward. Just one follow-up to whatever we've been seeing so far, and I think it's been addressed in earlier questions as well, but I think the critical thing to address here is this issue of corporate governance that keeps coming up, and clearly we've done everything as we can to kind of address those issues, but what else can be done so that these issues don't crop up again, especially since this is the major issue that seems to have been distracting everyone from everyday work?
As you correctly have said, we believe we've done everything any good board must do, both in terms of investigating this not once, but 3 times by independent, most recently by a globally respected independent investigative firm in the form of Gibson Dunn. They had complete unfettered access to everybody, all documentation, including the founder, and they found no evidence whatsoever. We believe we have made the appropriate and necessary disclosures. To my mind, no company has gone as far as we have in terms of our disclosure. So we are intending to simply keep moving. Okay, continuously be looking at the rearview mirror, and while it may be challenging to do so, that's our intention.
All the best.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Arvind Ramnani from KeyBank. Please go ahead.
Hi, Vishal, really sorry to see you go. I guess just wanted to fully understand. You indicated that you're really not looking to kind of really put a reset on the strategy, and assuming you find the right leader, will a leader face the same issues from the founders? Because if you kind of look at the root cause of what's happening is kind of the friction between the founders and the CEO. How do you systematically solve the founder-related issues, and will that also prevent you from hiring a very qualified CEO?
I believe we've answered that a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean,
the dialogue with the founders to find reasonable solutions has worked partially, but eventually it has not. Our theory of change and stability now is that focus on performance. Every quarter, earn the confidence of our investors, shareholders, employees, and eventually, hopefully, these issues will recede. So, I think investor confidence is the key to, I think, getting to a better state.
I mean, is there discussion of buying back the founder shares, or is that not being discussed?
No, that has not been discussed. As you know, we are considering a share buyback, and that's about it.
Great. Thank you and good luck. Vishal, wish you the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, man.
Next question is from the line of Ashish Chopra from Motilal Oswal Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. First of all, Vishal, thanks for all your inputs over the past 3 years and wish you all the best. My question is to Ravi. So while it's been answered in part in terms of your views around having founder representation on the board, but just wanted to understand, the way forward that you see in terms of a smooth functioning for the board, as the distractions have not been limited to the operations of the CEO, but the board at large. And so, I mean, while not a founder representation, but do you think that, you may need to have any other changes on the board at this juncture, maybe a middle way out, and not just limited to the selection of a new CEO, but just to ensure an overall smooth functioning, till some of these things kind of settle down?
We'll consider those.
Okay. I think that's it from my side. Thanks and all the best, guys.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Abhishek Bhandari from Macquarie. Please go ahead.
Vishal, I just had one question for you. Can anything make you reconsider your decision?
No, that is, we went over that over the last few days. In fact, Ravi asked me earlier today as well, but no, I mean, if you look at some of the questions that all of you have asked, it does point out to the fact that a new beginning creates an opportunity for I think you can think of it as, in product development these days, we think about minimum viable product and we think about viability thresholds and iterations, rapid iterations. And so we can think of this as a 3-year journey where we did a lot of work. And now a new team can come and take the learnings from this. Like Ravi said, the board is committed to the strategy that we are on because frankly, it is a somewhat obvious, it's pretty clear what needs to be done. Software is eating the world, therefore we have to get software to eat services. And if it is somebody else's software, then you are leaving that money on the table. So it has to be our own software, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very clear path forward. And with regard to the working environment and the overall atmosphere, my own sense is that that this will, make it easier for a new team to be successful.
The reason I'm asking is that you still have, 6 months for the handover, and let's say certain things change. Is there any remote possibility? Thanks.
Well, thanks. I mean, that's what can you say? We'll see how it goes. But right now, we have made a pretty clear commitment to the direction forward, and the nominations committee, like Ravi said, is going to start looking for a new CEO. Praveen and I are here, and we are going to make sure that there is no slippage, there is no skip beats here, and I will help the new leadership get to the reins as much as I can, as well as I can, and I think that's what we are looking at. But who knows what life brings.
Sure. Thanks.
By the way, I don't have any other plans. It's not that I have something lined up or I have no idea what I'm going to do. And hopefully we find a good CEO from inside or outside soon, and then I can take some time off and go surfing.
Sure. Thanks, and all the best, Vishal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Avinash Vajrani from Jupiter. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for taking the question. The question's really addressed to Ravi. And, what we've seen so far is a lot of dirty laundry being washed in the public. I'm just wondering, should the board not take the responsibility for not shielding the management from these so-called allegations? And what is it that what is the board doing in terms of seeking investor feedback? Because I've not seen the board members in years seeking any investor feedback. How do you know what the investors really want rather than just taking feedback from the analysts? And if you look at the call this morning, most of the questions are coming from analysts. I mean, is there something not really dysfunctional at the board level that needs to be addressed here? If we just look at the composition of the board, we have 2 joint chairmen and an executive vice chairman. Who is the boss? Maybe if I could have your thoughts on this, Ravi, please. And clearly, it's a sad day for us as investors to see Vishal leave, and, our personal thoughts aside, and, all the very best wishes to him. But I'd really like some thoughts from you, Ravi, on the board.
No, it's a very fair, if difficult question. Personally, I have gone out publicly more and more in recent weeks, and especially so last week, to reiterate the board's complete support for both the strategy and for Vishal as our CEO. And I did so unambiguously on television and in print. And Vishal knows that he and the management team has the full support and confidence of our board. We have tried very vocally to put the right perspective on the unfounded allegations that have been out there, and tried our best to ignore them and keep on moving. At some point, I think it has just got to Vishal. I think you raise a much more important point about, going out and determining what our investors actually feel. And we've been doing some of that. We intend to do much, much more of it right away. At our very last board meeting on July 13th, we went through a refresh of the committees of the board. And one of the major changes was that I stepped up as the chair of our Stakeholder Relations Committee. And that is in a significant part acknowledgement of the importance of this. So Sesh, Vishal, myself, Ranga, Praveen, we're going to be hitting 5 or 6 cities pretty hard in the next 2-3 weeks, doing exactly what you suggest. So I thank you for that reminder.
I think just...
And just to add, from my side, I would say that clearly Praveen is in charge as the senior-most executive, as the managing director and CEO. Even if it is an interim basis, he is the MD and CEO now. And I am the senior-most executive in the company. And then, of course, Ravi and Sesh and Prahlad run what we call the committee of directors, which works closely with us. And so there is no problem. And in terms of the command and control, the buck clearly stops with Praveen, and so far as I can help with me.
I think there is a more fundamental question here, and it's clearly not whether the management enjoys the support of the board and indeed the shareholders. I think the question is whether the board enjoys the support of the investors and the shareholders. And, as an investor, there's clearly been a failure on part of the board to get the company in a situation where it is now. And nobody seems to want to address this question, either in the press or elsewhere. And it's not a battle that needs to be fought in the press. We call, there's a repeated allegations and counter-allegations and, founders. The founders are shareholders, right? You cannot take, you cannot only have discussions with one set of shareholders simply because they were founders. The board needs to address how to handle the entire bunch of shareholders. The board must represent all shareholders and not just some part of shareholders. And, as an investor, I think, the board needs refreshing. And, I will leave it at that. And
no, your point is
on your roadshow.
No, we note your point, and we hope to address what you say in a matter of weeks.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the last question for today. I would now like to hand over the floor back to Mr. Sandeep Mahindra for his closing comments. Over to you, sir.
Thanks everyone for joining us on this call. We look forward to connecting with you again at 6 p.m. for the next call. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Infosys, that concludes this conference call. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.
Okay, you are with Bloomberg Quint. We were live with you ahead of the con call. We made you hear the con call live as well. And now we are back to analyze what we think were the key takeaways of the con call. A bunch of experts joining in a bit later on in the show as well. I'm Neeraj Shah. With me will be Menka Doshi and Harsha Subramaniam in just moments from now. But amongst the 2 or 3 things that stood out, I mean, one, of course, the constant reassurance by Vishal Sikka that he is still here, not going anywhere. I mean, it was just probably playing for the gallery, so to say. But I think 2 or 3 things stood out, and Harsha is with me as well. One, a statement by Ravi Venkatesan, wherein he said, when asked about the new CEO, we're talking about the future, and he mentioned that it is going to be a challenging job, but hopefully Infosys brand name and the momentum that we have will make a new candidate draw courage. He used the term courage. And it goes back to the conversation that we were having, Harsha, that for a new guy to come in, it takes a lot more beyond just seeing the business optics that would be at play if he takes over Infosys.
Yeah, it's almost like leading a war against China, isn't it?
Yeah.
Come on, I found it quite amusing. But 2 quick points, Neeraj, on what Vishal Sikka said, the point that you were making. Quick recap of what came on the con call when he first started speaking. One, he says, drumbeat of allegations by shareholders led by, he didn't mention Murthy's name, but that's what he was implying, has been absolutely sickening. Since January, allegations have gotten worse, increasingly malicious and personal. This is the CEO of the erstwhile CEO of Infosys talking against a bunch of shareholders led by Mr. Murthy, saying that they were malicious and personal. And a slightly longer one, he says, every morning since January, I had to contend with these media reports and the same allegations over and over again that have been addressed adequately. This is referring to the Panay acquisitions and the questions that have been raised since then. I ended up spending way too much time responding to this chaos rather than focus on the business. This is the CEO of a listed company saying that I'm unable to focus on my business and I had to focus on the allegations that the board says has been addressed adequately. This is a great disservice to our transformational efforts. We have he's heard about what is going on. He's clearly helpless, which is forces exit.
Yeah, there was one dichotomy in the call that I noticed, Harsha. Towards the end of the call, I think Ravi Venkatesan mentioned that they can't really comment on the buyback because it's scheduled for the board meeting tomorrow. But at the start of the call, I think I heard Vishal Sikka in his opening statement say that the buyback goes ahead as planned. From a stock perspective, this is important because remember, I bring the stock perspective because it is 9% down. This is just a stone's throw away from its 52-week low. And yes, IT is a sector in turmoil, but this has clearly got to do with what's happened. And I dare you, I must mention that yesterday the stock was up 4.5% on the buyback announcement. Had that not been the case, and this would have been announced today, Infosys would be well trading sub its 52-week low. So the stock is down 9%, just that one bit of dichotomy. But I thought when the opening comment came in, that it almost seemed that the buyback tomorrow goes ahead as planned, and that will probably give a bit of a shore up to the price. But this is not just about the stock price, is it? It's more about how the whole process has turned out to be.
No, I think the larger question, is this the end of Infosys as we know it? Because there are three large questions that the company needs to answer. And the last question on the con call was a very interesting one. This is not about the board losing confidence in its CEO. This is about the board losing confidence with its investors. And I don't know who the last gentleman on the call was, and he said, listen, you know, this is a dysfunctional board because you've got two guys as the chairman. One is the chairman, the other is a co-chair, and now an executive chair. The simple question he asked was, who is the boss? Who's running the show? And who's going to be in charge of ensuring that a CEO comes on board? These are serious questions that Infosys has to face. Never has happened before. But long story short, this is this is just the beginning of the troubles that we're going to see with Infosys.
Yeah, Menka is here as well. Menka,
you know,
what
guys,
do you think?
I was listening into both the conference call, and I know Harsha has key takeaways from what Vishal Sikka had to say. He was very calm in the conference call, expressed a lot of regret for the way things have panned out, and sort of tried to reinforce confidence in the company, saying, hey, it's not just my vision, it's a group vision, it's a board vision, lots of senior executives and team members here, and they will help take that vision forward. As analyst calls go after events of this nature and magnitude, I thought it was a very, very mature conference call to just offer an opinion there. But I think more than the conference call, minutes before the conference call, the statement issued by the Infosys board now adds a new angle to this story. And that statement suggests that the Infosys board is taking Narayan Murthy head on, right? Yep. So I've tried to pull out some key elements from that statement that, in a sense tell you why the Infosys board is blaming Murthy for Sikka's departure. I'm hoping that pointer plate will come up at some point. But this is what I'm going to say. Murthy's continuous assault is the primary reason that Sikka resigned. This is the sum and substance of that statement, that his continuous assault is the primary reason that Sikka resigned, that Murthy's letter regarding the many governance lapses at Infosys contains factual inaccuracies. The board will not be distracted by, and I quote, the misguided campaign of Narayan Murthy. Misguided campaign. These are strong words for a company board to use. And don't forget, the people on that board are of stature. Ravi Venkatesan, who's headed Microsoft in India before, R. Seshasai, who's worked in Ashok Leyland before, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, the head of Biocon in this country, and a variety of others, right? Then it goes on to say, Murthy's campaign has undermined the company's effort to transform itself. The board has declined to speculate on Murthy's motive. So they've brought motive into it now, suggesting that there is more here at play than just simply unhappiness with governance. And they said we don't want to speculate on what that motive is. But by using the word motive, they very clearly said, in so many words, that there is motive.
Correct.
This is not just you don't see things the way we see things. There is a bigger game at play. Then it goes on to say Murthy did not. So they say that there was an investigation that was undertaken by Gibb & Dunson, if I remember correctly,
Yes.
in the acquisition of Panaya, right? And they said in that investigation, the investigators spoke to Narayan Murthy as well. Murthy did not provide any evidence in that internal investigation of the Panaya acquisition, right? So they're saying he was given a chance. He had made allegations that the acquisition was not kosher, it was not above board, that there were lapses in the way information was shared about that acquisition. He was given an opportunity to provide evidence to support his allegations. He did not provide any. And then they go on to say in that paragraph that he has not disclosed this when he went to the media with other comments. Yeah. So that's an important point the board has made. Then they said Murthy demanded changes in the company's functioning, or else he would attack board members in public. They've used the word threat in that sentence there. So he said that this speaks so poorly of a founder if the board is to be believed. Let me put that here. This is one side of the story. Then they said Murthy preferred his diktat should prevail when it comes to remuneration packages, even though Vishal Sikka's remuneration package was approved by shareholders. So they're raising the question that who is this first amongst shareholders? When all shareholders have approved the package, why are you raising an issue about it? And why do you expect your diktat should be followed when shareholders otherwise have said yes? And finally, they've said the board has no intention of asking Murthy to play a formal role in the organization. Yes. They have ruled out the return of Narayan Murthy in any form whatsoever in that statement. It's a statement they reiterated in the conference call, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and these are some of the key takeaways of what the board has had to say in that statement that was released just minutes before the conference call. In the years that I have covered corporate India, I have not seen such a strongly worded board statement against a co-founder of a company. And I think this is, as I put out on social media, the gloves are off, and this is just going to be yet another front this battle is going to be fought on.
And this is a battle between the board and a person of Narayan Murthy's stature. I just wanted to add one point from the statement as well, Menika. And this is with respect to the Remunerations Committee. Remember, one of the allegations that Murthy made at that point in time was when Vishal Sikka's pay was hiked, so was Praveen Rao's pay hiked. After which there was a series of dirty linen in public. In that context, they say, this is the letter from the board, Murthy has demanded that the board appoint specific individuals onto the board under similar threat, without appropriate disclosure, and without regard to basic determinants of appropriateness or fit of the candidate for the role as a board member. What happened a couple of months after that was D.N. Prahalad was inducted into the board as an independent director. Now, D.N. Prahalad was an ex-employee of the company. Even then, corporate governance issues were raised, saying he is a distant relative of Narayan Murthy. That aside, the board clearly wasn't happy with this guy being thrust onto the board position. He was also made a part of the remuneration committee, which then decides Praveen Rao's and Vishal Sikka's pay. Now, this is one hot mess. There is no other way to describe it. Yeah, and this is Infosys.
And Harsha, I just want to point out here a point that you made in the earlier morning conversation we were having, and that is that this is one side of the story, guys. This is not both sides of the story. Yeah. While the board has this to say about Narayan Murthy, the point that you made in the morning that Murthy was asking for transparency, and he was asking for the investigation reports to be published and made public, and the board has summarily refused to do that. And someone might read into that and say, why? If your investigation reports found nothing wrong with the way Panaya was acquired or other things were done in the company, why would you not share it? So there is clearly two sides to this story. But what these developments tell you is that this is just the beginning of this battle and not the end, because I'm sure Mr. Murthy is not going to stay silent. The board has pointed a finger at him and he's going to come back. And I think we have Ajay Baga on the line as a market expert to tell us how he's viewing this from the outside. Ajay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on Bloomberg Queen's live broadcast on the developments at Infosys and the resignation of Vishal Sikka. What do you make of the fact that the board now has made its point against Narayan Murthy very clear and very public?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate for investors, Menika. So, no matter who's right, investors lose out, because this washing of dirty linen in the public, first by Narayan Murthy, and the board was being a little more polite and trying to carry this on. And today, as you said earlier, the gloves are off on the board side. investors lose out. You're seeing it in the share price as well. So overall, these things have to be done in the boardroom, not in public like this, because then there is no end to it. And institutional investors would just press and exit. That too much uncertainty. And in this kind of a scenario, who would come in as a CEO? What Harsha was mentioning earlier, if there are two co-chairmen, and Seshasai has already said at the AGM, that he will step down when he turns 70 next year. So, there was already that issue going on that, okay, the co-chairman become one chairman in Ravi, and then Narayan Murthy comes in or not, what happens? Now there is further uncertainty brought into the whole process. So overall tech sector not doing too well, all the headwinds, and then you bring in a leadership crisis and some kind of a vacuum. How dirty does this business get? That leads to a lot of uncertainty in the minds of investors. The biggest loser, even bigger than Sikka, is the investor who's not got returns for 5 years, and now it becomes even more bleaker, the landscape.
That's very well said, Ajay. Sorry, I know Neeraj has a question for you, but before Neeraj, you ask that question, I just want to urge our viewers that you can reach us through Twitter and Facebook, and you can put your questions to the market experts that we have speaking to us this afternoon. Ajay Baga is here. Vikas Khemani will be joining us in a few minutes, and we've got, Nishant, our reporter in Bangalore at the Infosys campus, gauging the mood of employees. We will get you all those comments in just a bit, but send us your questions if you have any about this drama unfolding at Infosys.
No, just that one point, Menka, that the stock is down 9%, Harsha and Menka, and US is not awake.
Yes.
I think that will add fuel to the fire today. It's very close to its 52-week lows. The buyback may shore up the price a little bit, but I dare say this will not sit down well with investors. And the nature of the letter, as well as the tone in the conference call, leaves a lot to be desired. Me and Harsha were just talking about the fact that Ravi Venkatesan used the word that the new CEO, whoever the new CEO is, hopefully by virtue of the vision that we have and the momentum that we have in the company, will find courage to join the company. That's not what you want from a new CEO. You want the CEO to look at the business optics and come in, not having courage to join the company. That spells about what the board is thinking right now as well. I'm told Vikas Khemani is also with us. Vikas, how are you reading into this whole saga as somebody who's advised a lot of investors on what to do with their investments in IT and India? I mean, what would your message be to your top clients who call you and ask you for advice about what to do with investments in Infosys?
So I think this is definitely a unfortunate situation, and this needs to get resolved. And especially when the industry is facing tough time, you need a very decisive and a clear leadership to kind of not only turn around the change required in the company from a capability perspective and also withstand the kind of headwinds. So I think you need a decisive leadership. This is unfortunate that this is happening, and I would still wait for some more time to get clarity, because I think investors should keep in mind the valuation and the possible buyback, which will keep the downside limited. But at the same time, I think the leadership crisis has a long-term impact on the company, and unless that gets solved, unless that gets clarified, I think the uncertainty will prevail in investors' mind, and that will, definitely, keep the overhang on the stock. So I would believe that, over the next couple of weeks, there should be some clarity which should come about. I'm sure everybody's worried. Shareholders are going to put pressure on the management and founders, and I think this entire heightened public spat would create a lot of pressure to make sure that it gets resolved quickly. And I think so. Look forward for that, and I don't think anybody should act in haste, because I think still it's a credible institution. Nothing has gone. It's not that. So I think it will resolve. We've seen similar kind of anxiety was there when this kind of situation came out in Tata Group, and this is all behind us now. As you would say that that time there was a lot of anxiety, but now I think everything has got resolved. So I would assume that similar kind of situation would happen in Infosys.
Okay, because I just have one question, and this really came up on the con call as well. an investor asking Ravi Venkatesan saying this is not about the board losing confidence in its CEO, but the board losing confidence of investors. And why is it that only one clutch of investors and their concerns were given priority and the other shareholders were not even heeded to? The question that I have to you is that why should investors really believe in the story? You clearly have a dysfunctional board even now, don't you?
I think it will be inappropriate to call it dysfunctional board, but I think the board is trying to keep the interest of all stakeholders in, and I would assume that they have faced some challenges. So I think the fact that this is coming out in open also, I think, probably determine or frame the rules of the game going forward. For whose fault is the chairman or management, MD and CEO, what kind of influence outside shareholders will be able to have or not have. I think this will, in my opinion, get resolved over next few months or 1 or 2 quarters. I don't think next upcoming CEO would have that kind of challenges, because I think he will come with clear-cut knowledge of all the possible things in mind, and after having resolved a lot of other possible influences. So I think I would assume that investors should have faith in the institution. Every organization go through kind of some sort of crisis. They will get over with it, and I do believe that Infosys also will get over it.
I have a question for both you gentlemen, Vikas, you and Ajay, and that is that you are both hopeful, and as are we, that this crisis will get resolved sometime soon. But today, if you notice the board's statement, it has pointed a finger at Narayan Murthy's behavior. And I'm sure that Mr. Murthy is not going to stay silent about this. What time gap do you think there will be between now and these matters being resolved? How do you figure out what to do, or whether this will escalate from here on? And finally, Mr. Murthy will continue to stay a shareholder in this company. He may always or often have a different point of view from the board or the way the new management is, whoever the new management is. What kind of discount does that put to this stock in the months to come? Because you feel that there's this sense of divisiveness between the board, the co-founders or the former promoters, and the new management, whoever has the courage to come in. Vikas?
So I think, as I said, the fact that uncertainty is there, that's why the stock is down. But investors who can put up with this short-term temporary phase of this information would stay put, and I'm sure there would be investors who would stay put. There are long-term investors who have believed in the story, in fact, are today buying as well. So I do believe that, there would be, reaction to every, story. I'm sure if the value goes down, I think in Mr. Murthy's value also goes down in this case. So I'm sure he's not going to do a destructive approach for long term. He has a point of view, and I'm sure there is a lot of back channel talks and things are happening in terms of resolving the issue. So I'm not, at least given whatever I know right now, I don't believe that it can get degenerated in a big way to create the damage to the institution. I would believe that it will resolve sooner than later.
Ajay, your response to my earlier question, and also to tag on to that, would you be a buyer in the Infosys stock today?
So I would go back, as investors, what do we have to see? We have asymmetrical information. He's not got up today in California and decided to resign. This has happened over a couple of weeks. It is pre-planned by the board and by the company management. They have a share buyback announced tomorrow to put a floor on the pricing. So it's not a knee-jerk reaction but it is a drama unfolding. So as an investor, what do? When you have asymmetrical information, you go back to the fundamentals. Fundamentals of the tech sector are poor, and it will be a multi-year, transformation of business models that will be needed. So on top of that, you add on this uncertainty. So fresh buying, very, very difficult to really recommend. Infosys is at 14.3, 14.4 PE. The sector is at 18 times, and a sector which used to be 25, 30 times very easily, and we used to invest in this sector. But the whole business model has changed. And if you compare them to even an Oracle cloud business or an Amazon's cloud business, today an Apple services business becomes a Fortune 100 company, growing at about 28% in dollar terms. They're bringing in $7 billion of revenues quarter on quarter. Apple as a product company is doing services. Our service companies are lagging. So as it is, I would not recommend anybody getting into Indian IT services right now. On top of that, you add uncertainty, it becomes very difficult. Will smart money come in? I doubt, because this is just the first punch, Menika. This is after Narayan Murthy's last attack, this is the first punch back. There will be forces on both sides who will now be trying. Narayan Murthy has no legal way of taking over the company. He doesn't have the shareholding. The board, in the end, has to act for us as shareholders. I don't think they did that today by washing all this thing in the public. I think they did a big disservice to investors today. So already, look at cases like a Yahoo, which lost so many CEOs. It was all done. The media like you would bring out the stories later on, but it was managed well. In the end, Marissa Mayer has gone out after selling the company, taking her package, and nobody is really gone public. Either the board
that is an unfortunate comparison because like you pointed out, it did involve selling the company. Ajay, Vikas, stay with us. We have a governance voice joining us now. Jayan Gupta, the founder of SES and the former executive director at SEBI. Mr. Gupta, it's been a dramatic morning. What do you expect should be the next steps of this board if it wants to restore investor confidence in Infosys? Because that really is the only question facing us today. How does this company get back on track?
There are a couple of issues, but the first thing from the governance perspective will be that there is no point not making report of an investigator public, because if you want to have the highest standard of governance, be fully transparent whether the law demands it or not. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is this: in this particular case, we find a very peculiar situation where a group of shareholders who are founder, ex-promoter of the company, are exercising their weight disproportionate to the total shareholders. There are 85% other shareholders who are having a voice, but the voice of the 15% promoter shareholder or founder shareholders, because of their sheer reputation, weight of their sheer reputation, is making a lot of noise, and the voice of other investors is getting lost. Now, the issue is very clearly that the board of the Infosys, when Mr. Murthy or Mr. Nilekani, everybody moved, remained the same. It did not happen that entire board changed. So there has been a continuity. Now, if you say that the board at the time when Mr. Murthy was transparent, was very well governance oriented, suddenly after Mr. Murthy left, then the board have been in disarray and they are not bothering about governance. This is a very difficult thing to digest. The only thing where I would say positive and negative that Infosys behavior in the recent episode is bad because they did not disclose the report. Otherwise, I would have been saying that Mr. Murthy is trying to fire bullets from somebody else's shoulder. If he is interested very much, why don't join the company as a board member or chairman or whatever thing you take, and take a front role. Don't do firing from the backside.
Gupta, in response to that, I think the company has ruled that out today because it said it has no intention of asking Mr. Murthy to play a formal role in the organization. But that said, there have been rumors in the recent past that maybe the board or the company will benefit from having Nandan Nilekani return. There is no way to confirm that. Mr. Nilekani was not reachable and he has not commented on any potential return. So it could very well just be a rumor. But I wonder if that is what it will take to install some sense of confidence in investors.
Mr. Gupta, just one question. In the press statement today, some of the allegations made by the board are extremely serious. 2 points that I want to allude to. One, it says that Mr. Murthy forced their hand to change policy, almost forced their hand to induct a member on the board. Would SEBI have a view on this? You mentioned about the fact that the report needs to be made public. There has clearly been an acquisition done in 2015. Several questions have been raised so far. Would SEBI have a view in asking Infosys to, bring out the evidence?
See, SEBI will not be asking to bring, because if it is not required under the disclosure practice, they will not be asking. But here, we always maintain that the governance is not the law. The governance begins when the boundary of law ends. So Infosys has been saying that they are the best governed company, so let them demonstrate by making it public. Because if you are not wrong, what is wrong making everything public? So that is one aspect. The other thing which I was saying, that Mr. Murthy coming back, the fact is that the 85% shareholder may not like Mr. Murthy to be back, so the resolution will be defeated. So I would say that please test the water, whether you are wanted in the company or not, contest for the post of directorship and do it. The issue is this, that having given up the position and having taken high moral ground that now I have left the company, I want people to take it over and something, then if Mr. Murthy were to do that, he will be coming down in his own statement. So that's why he will never do that. And he will keep on continuing because he feels that somehow or other he is not having the full-time job. So that's why he will keep on fighting all these things.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gupta, for those very incisive thoughts. Harsha, just to add to Mr. Gupta's answer to your question on will SEBI come in here at all? No. We had a much uglier battle play out at the Tata Group. A much uglier battle where the allegations were of a far more serious nature. There was an insider trading allegation. Yes. There was allegation of some related party, transactions having gone wrong. And I know that SEBI had instructed the exchanges to look into some of these matters, and there was some sort of questioning that had happened. There wasn't any serious investigation, so to speak. So I would agree with Mr. Gupta that I don't think this is the purview of regulatory agencies, right? Unless there is some disclosure that has been found short of the regulations.
No, my only question, Menika, is has there been any wrongdoing in the Pana acquisition? We still don't know. We are still going by the report that the legal firm employed by the board has given to the public.
Yeah.
And that's the only thread that perhaps Mr. Murthy is leveraging with the board as well, saying that do this or else. Now, what is that leverage that he has? I mean, other than what's appearing in the media. So that's my only question. Second is, clearly in this case, all shareholders are equal, but clearly some are more equal than the others. And only a bunch of shareholders have been given any attention by the board at all.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I'm not suggesting that it's wrong. I also like Mr. Gupta's point that if Narayan Murthy believes that the campaign that he is waging, and I'm using the word campaign because the board used it, that he is waging is in the better interests of the company and corporate governance of the company, then maybe he should test it in a shareholder fashion, right? Yeah. Maybe he should move to, replace the entire board. As a shareholder, he can at least attempt to move such a resolution and see if he finds other shareholders to support him in any fashion. But this whole leaking of letters and emails just doesn't seem to be the kind of thing that someone of Mr. Murthy's stature should be indulging in, if at all he's indulged in this or anyone around him has indulged in this. Neeraj?
No, it doesn't. The other thing that I think the call focused on, and we would get in Ajay Bagga's comments on this as well, I think the other thing, 3 questions came in on what's the nature of the new hiring that will be done of the new CEO. And I think 2 things that Ravi, I think, replied to. One is that they need a charismatic figure to come in and take shape and form, without any alluding to whether it could be an internal figure. I think that kind of ruled out because the answer was in a reply to whether there's an internal figure coming in.
Now, charismatic means Kshatriya.
Well,
what does it mean?
And the Kshatriya was supposed to stay.
Yeah.
So,
Ajay, who's going to be the charismatic new CEO of Infosys?
I think, Menika, you mentioned it earlier, Nandan Nilenkani will be acceptable to Narayan Murthy and would be charismatic also. But does he want to do this at this stage in life, being an investor in his own right?
No, but I must tell you, Ajay, I must tell you that, having spoken to 2 or 3 investors, all of them said that Nandan, and with due respect, and he's been a great leader of Infosys, but he's not been in the driving seat of an IT company for the past so many years. So he can be that guiding force, but I think they need an active person who is in the thick of things to also manage.
I don't know, what is the guarantee that you will have one more person come in, not Nandan, but someone from the outside, like Vishal Sikka was from the outside, and that person will get along with the board, and that person will get along with Mr. Murthy, and Mr. Murthy will get along with the board, especially after this letter that the board has written about him today, and the board will get along with Mr. Murthy, especially after all the allegations Mr. Murthy has made about the incompetence of the board. My gosh, this is like, one very sad Indian joint family story. Nobody's ever going to live in peace together unless they all separate out.
I don't think a new CEO is likely to take up the job unless the board gets fixed. And that, I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know if Murthy is already planning a fresh salvo in sort of either resolution to change the board or the board members quit themselves. Some of that has to play out in the next couple of weeks before a new CEO takes in. Because the same questions of anyone who's applying for this job will ask exactly the same questions, right?
Yeah, let's put that question to Sudhin Apte. He joins us now. He's Principal Analyst and CEO of Offshore Insights, an expert on technology and technology companies. And Sudhin, how are you viewing the events of this morning? And do you think there is going to be a charismatic candidate waiting in the wings to take Infosys to the next level?
It's very unfortunate what's happened actually. For the first time in the last 5 years, I felt that Infosys is in a better position to engage with the clients. And, on field we felt that energy levels have increased. They have started getting small response. And, this was a perfect time for them to get back to the growth trajectory which they used to enjoy a few years back. And constantly last 6 months, I think one, obviously, this founder-related issues which are going on, and second one, of course, the press bashing around non-issues like removal of people, etc. And Infosys has been constantly facing those challenges. I actually feel, since morning I'm hearing the commentary on different channels and also heard, Infosys board commentary. No one is really talking about clients. And today evening we are going to do advisory for our 600 plus clients, including 90 odd 10 million plus accounts of $1 million plus accounts of Infosys. And we're actually going to give an advisory that watch out of Infosys, mitigate your risks, don't give additional work to Infosys, because we don't feel this will get over in the foreseeable future. So I think client is going to be very nervous because if the board, the management, delivery heads are going to be busy in internal issues, no one is worried about clients, it seems to me. And that's really unfortunate. And we are not realizing that, CEO, no CEO, new CEO, valuation, if clients start deserting Infosys, then that will be really, really bad news for Infosys. And I think, looking at what's happening, that day is not far off now.
Yeah,
I as an advisor and somebody who cares about the client, I am 100% going to advise my clients, and that's a sizable chunk of Infosys revenue, that watch out for what's happening in Infosys. Don't give additional work and mitigate your every critical engagement with Infosys. Because I do believe that there will be a rise in attrition. I do believe that there will be senior level exits. And, I really worry that if any right-minded, really good capability person will join the company at this stage, where, founder, minority shareholders can pressurize the whole company, and the person has to go. He has been hounded out. So it's really unfortunate what has been happening in Infosys. And remember one more thing. Infosys, irrespective of the fact that they have not been doing great in last, few quarters, it's a poster boy of Indian IT. Yeah. It will impact Indian IT's image. And every 3 years and 4 years down the line, one Satyam, then earlier some security breaches, and then Infosys, we are just getting a bad name for this industry. And it's unfortunate that the forefathers or the key people who built this industry are the people who are contributing to this actively.
By the way, Sudhin, as you've been talking about the employee morale amongst other things, I think Nishant Sharma, who's been speaking to Infosys employees, joins us right now from just outside the company's headquarters. I think it's important to get that feedback as well. Nishant, what are you gathering?
Well, the atmosphere here is definitely tense. I've been standing outside the Infosys campus from the last 2 hours, and the media's access has also been restricted. We haven't been allowed to enter. We are waiting for the press conference, which is supposed to be scheduled at 2 p.m. today. And I spoke to 1 or 2 employees who did not wish to speak in front of the camera, and they were really shocked at what has happened recently. One of the employees told me that they really believed in the vision of Mr. Vishal Sikka and the way he was steering the company forward. And the next question they have in their mind is that what happens from now onwards? Who will lead the company, and who will drive the same vision forward and keep the morale of the employees high? Because from the last couple of months there have been a lot of news about the governance issues and so on. So as far as employees are concerned, now their next concern is who can lead the company.
Ms. Menaka here, a quick question on how are employees viewing Mr. Narayan Murthy's involvement in this drama? Do they have any thoughts about whether they feel or agree with what the former head of Infosys and co-founder of Infosys feels about the current management, or are they more on the side of Vishal Sikka?
Well, one of the employees told me that, the way the things have been handled could have been handled in a better way. They have been more upfront rather than, these media leaks that we have been seeing of letters or the visions or what have been shared in the media so far. They would have rather expected Mr. Narendra to come upfront if they had any issue with the way Mr. Vishal Sikka was leading the company.
Nishant, thank you very much. I know you're going to have a long day there, parked outside Infosys for a bit and then inside Infosys. All the very best for that coverage. Nishant Sharma joining us there from outside Infosys in Bangalore, saying employees concerned about the future of this company. Sudhin Apte saying his firm is going to issue an advisory to clients saying don't give any further business to Infosys given the current uncertainty surrounding the company. We have one more expert voice joining us now, Pramod Gubbi, Managing Director and Head of Institutional Equities at Ambit Capital, joining us. Pramod, your thoughts on what happens to Infosys from here on?
Yeah, I mean, it's only going to get more uncertain, given that at least on the fundamentals, we had some view that the actions being taken by the CEO's strategy to transform or at least adapt to the changes that's happening in the external world were progressing well, as indicated by the performance on both growth and margins. The only issue was around governance and disclosures and this whole unnecessary distraction from that. This event simply takes that level of uncertainty to a different level, and that clearly will weigh down on the stock in terms of its rating and multiple, and will keep investors and pretty much every stakeholder in limbo going forward, unless and until we see an end to the whole drama through significantly high levels of disclosures from the board, starting with the findings of the investigation they had from the external agencies. I can't seem to think of any reason why that should be held private, particularly given the cost of doing that. Is it worth letting go of someone who is perceived to be delivering the change that Infosys needed? So to that extent, I think a good start on the governance front should be the disclosure of that report. And if there's nothing untoward in this, and I guess that could be a starting point of putting an end to this uncertainty, and Infosys can come back to working on fundamentals, and shareholders and employees get some comfort that all's well there.
I want to get Ajay Bagga as well back into this conversation. Ajay, we've been speaking about the immediate event, and we all agree that this is going to be a long saga. What does an investor in Infosys today do? Somebody who's already invested in the stock long term, either through a fund or directly on the stock. What does one do with
especially with the buyback announcement coming in tomorrow?
What does one do?
I think today is not the time to react already. Of course, what happens in the institutional investors, as well as, yesterday, given the movement in the stock on the, forecast of a board meeting and a share buyback, the stock had moved up. So this would have been a triggering of stop losses, plus institutions would have taken a view of moving out. Already it was an under-owned stock as far as domestic mutual funds go. IT has been under-owned overall for the past 6 months to 9 months. So overall, even if this situation was not there, I would not put a buy on IT as a sector for reasons I've enumerated earlier. Given this, this becomes even more difficult, is what I would say. For existing investors, this is not the time at 14 times PE. I think there is value, but it will be a multi-year value. Good companies always come back. We have seen that many times earlier. It's not one leader doesn't make the company. It's a huge company that way. It will come back. How long it takes is anybody's guess, but definitely at 9.5% down, not the time to bail out now. And secondly, given the share buyback that's hopefully being announced tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the immediate trigger. Ajay, thanks a lot for joining us and giving us that perspective as well. Pramod, just a question there. We had Sudhin Apte of Offshore Insights earlier, and he mentioned that he would be telling all of his clients, and he also mentioned that some of his clients form a large part of Infosys client book, and their advice would be that don't give further business. Now, whether they take that advice or no, that's a separate thing altogether. But this would be playing on the minds of investors, right? That until this issue is resolved, what happens to business? What happens to employee morale? What happens to attrition that over the last 3 years came down from 15-16% to about 9% under Sikka's reign? And if that starts to pick up, and what happens to employee costs, so on and so forth. In such a scenario, wherein IT is anyways a sector which is not liked too much, why bother with Infosys?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we had a buy rating on Infosys until about 4 days ago, literally earlier this week. We pulled the buy rating out primarily on the basis that we believe that we are in no position to make an assessment of the business given the lack of disclosure emerging from the current crisis. And today's events simply takes that complexity even more to the extent that as an analyst or as an investor, it simply becomes, unanalyzable, or at least you're not in a position to make a call clearly. And like you said, given the concerns surrounding the sector, at least we were of the opinion that Infosys is perhaps ahead of the curve in terms of adapting to the changes that the industry is facing. Now with who was an individual who was perceived to drive those changes out of the way, it becomes even more uncertain in terms of which way Infosys as a company and as a stock is headed. So it clearly goes out of the radar for most investors unless you're sort of neck deep in the stock.
A quick question on what you expect the board should do here on. There has been or have been some demands that some of the investigative reports be disclosed by the board and put out in the public. Do you think that will help restore some confidence in the current board? Would you say that we need a complete overhaul at Infosys, and that is not just a new management but a new board as well? And do you believe that if the buyback tomorrow is announced at a premium, that it might provide some sort of floor to this stock price?
I think the easiest answer is from the buyback, which perhaps will stem the rot in the short term, but the long-term value of the company will reside in the cash flows that will generate over several years to come. So to that extent, the more fundamental issues need to be addressed. I don't think there is a major overall required. Like the numbers suggested, over the last 3 years, there's been a steady recovery in the business from being a serial underperformer to the industry in terms of growth. Infosys come back to leading industry growth level with a positive trajectory to the margins. So there must be something right going on within the firm. The issues concerning are very concentrated around certain transactions and acquisitions made by the company whose concerns had been raised by this whistleblower, which again, the board took the right decision in terms of appointing external agencies to investigate that. The report is out there. All shareholders are demanding right now is in terms of full transparency. If there's nothing untoward in that report, I don't see any reason what could be the downside of that full disclosure. In fact, there's several upsides you can look at. First of all, at least stop the grievances out there, and hopefully get back the individual who orchestrated that sort of a turnaround. So the first starting point for the board should be to make full disclosure of the findings of the investigating agencies.
Pramod, I'm going to end this with one slightly uncomfortable question. Who would you pin the blame on for the recent events at Infosys? Do you think it was Vishal Sikka who did not perform to expectations? Do you think it was the board that did not follow the much honored governance practices at Infosys? Or do you think it was Mr. Murthy and some of the other co-founders of Infosys that from the outside attempted to try and run this company in some ways or make demands that were not reasonable?
I mean, very tough to see it from an external perspective like mine. Like I said, from what we see, Mr. Sikka's performance clearly showed in that industry-leading growth and margin expansion. So I don't think there's much to blame here. The issue is exactly around concerns raised by a whistleblower on a certain transaction which has been investigated. All shareholders require or deserve is to see the full findings of that transaction. To that extent, the easiest thing for the board to do is put that out in the open and rest all concerns be put aside. So I guess there is an easy answer to this, but will the board take that step is what needs to be seen.
All right, we will hear from the company this afternoon as well. Pramod, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So press conference in about half an hour or so from now. 40 minutes from now at 2 o'clock. I can't imagine they will have anything more or anything different to say from the conference call that they did. But the media is a little less polite than financial analysts are and investors are. And I'm sure that many tough and impolite questions will get asked this afternoon.
And they need to be asked. And they need to be asked.
So I'll tell you what I would love to ask if I was at that press conference, right? I'd really like to know why Vishal Sikka has been retained as Executive Vice Chairman. On what grounds did you ask him, or he resigned as Managing Director and CEO? Now, if he resigned because there were allegations made against him that he thought were unfair, sort of unfounded, and that he hadn't done anything to deserve this, he would resign and leave the company. Those allegations will continue. The Panaya acquisition is done with. Yeah. If you stay on in an executive vice chairman position, why would anyone stop those allegations, right? So you've chosen to stay on in a company and you've chosen to continue exposing yourself to those allegations. Now, why has that happened? Is there more to this than meets the eye? Should Sikka have gone altogether if he felt that hurt and wounded by what has gone on? So that's my question to Vishal Sikka, saying, why, if you're so hurt, would you stay on? Why would you just not move out? And you could say, I'm staying on for 3 months to provide continuity. But why would you say I'm staying on, right? That's one. That's the question I'd really like to ask. I'd really like to ask the board the question, Harsha, that you've been asking. Why not disclose the investigation reports? If nothing wrong has happened, disclose them, right? And I'd really, really like to ask Mr. Murthy whether he really thinks that his legacy in this country has benefited from this leaking of emails and letters. Now, Mr. Murthy will not be at the press conference, but if I had a chance to be in Bangalore, and Sajid is there, so I hope that Sajid gets a chance to ask him this question. But those are the 3 questions I would put to the 3 protagonists in this drama.
But how the mighty fall? This is a clear story of, again, we speak about Infosys as a glorious institution.
Harsha, this is life.
No, but Ambit saying that I'm pulling a buy rating on the stock because of issues of transparency. We're talking about Infosys. The irony in all of this is, when the original buyback proposal came way back 3 years ago, one of the reasons for that was it will build confidence in the incoming CEO. That was one of the factors in asking for the buyback. Look at where it is today. This buyback is pretty much to rescue the stock that's crashed nearly 9.5–10%. But this is a sad story today of shareholder democracy.
Sad, yes.
The collapse of corporate governance.
Not the end, though.
Not the end.
Sad, yes. I agree with you on that. We tend to get more emotive because we track things on a minute-by-minute basis. To us, it seems a lot bigger than maybe somebody who's watching with some degree of distance.
Yeah, but by the way, the stock is at a 52-week low now. It's broken the 900 level, so just must mark that. But I just had 2 points. One is, I think someone in the media will surely ask a question about the rumor that is doing the rounds about Nandan Nilekani. Nobody on the call asked about Nandan, so I think that would probably come up.
But how is the board going to answer that, or Vishal Sikka going to answer that? They'll deflect that to Nandan, right?
Well, hopefully, let's figure that out, because the board made it categorically clear that they will not approach Mr. Narayan Murthy at this point of time. Yes, there was an attachment there. But the other point that I just raised, if indeed the facts of this letter are true, and Narayan Murthy has been talking about why this shouldn't happen or that shouldn't happen because of corporate governance issues, Menka, Harsha. I mean, if Mr. Murthy is demanded that the board adopt certain changes in policy, else he'll attack board members in public, a threat like that.
I told you right at the start that I have not seen boards use this language. I've never seen an Infosys board, feel forced to use this kind of language. Yeah. This is very, very strong language. And by the way, guys, if you want to read more about that board statement that blames Narayan Murthy for Vishal Sikka's resignation, go to BloombergQuint.com. Make sure you do that.
Yeah. So anyways, the stock is sub 52-week lows, and the press conference at 2 p.m. So I think people will log in for that as well.
Harsha, last word?
Well, just on a lighter note, somebody said, why did Vishal Sikka do this? Because he was sick and tired of what's going on in Infosys.
The pun being on Sikka. Oh dear God. Twitter, by the way, is full of these comments. Guys, you can follow some of them on @BloombergQuint as well. With that, we'll come back later today as the story develops and we hear more from the management. Make sure that you stay tuned to BloombergQuint.com.